IB Nation, welcome back to another episode of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. Happy Tuesday. It is June 10th, which means it is summertime. It's starting. I don't know where you guys live. I know we have some IB listeners down south, but finally around here in Indianapolis, we're starting to get up into the 80s later this week. So it's starting to heat up. But it is also summertime for Notre Dame, which is going to cover a lot of what we're going to talk about today. Brian and I have been getting a lot of questions around, you know what, we know what fall camp is. We know what to expect around fall camp. What are the expectations in the summertime? Is it just the workouts and they're just in the weight room every day? What does that look like? So what we're going to do is we're going to break down what are some of the things that Notre Dame needs to tackle this summer. Part one, we're going to talk about it from an offensive standpoint because there's still some incomplete things from the spring that still have to get covered. Where you're then going to do the same on the defensive side of the ball. Notre Dame put out a tweet a couple days ago about some of the newcomers that are finally there. Gordy Solstead was in the picture. Mark Zachary and Dallas Golden were also in the picture. Bunch of players that we're going to cover. And then we're going to wrap up today's show, continuing our Notre Dame opponent preview. We're going to be diving into the Texas A&M Aggies, who Notre Dame hosts in their season opener. So I'm excited to dive into everything today. It's summertime. The sun's shining out. I'm in a great mood. I'm ready to talk about Notre Dame football today. Brian, how are you doing today, man?
Man, I'm doing great. I'm ready to go. We got a lot of good topics this week. Going to have some fun topics this week. We're going to be kicking off our position preview series soon, but I'm really excited to start talking about this because, as you said, Trevor, it's just a question we get a lot. Like, what do the summer workouts look like? How involved can coaches be? Like, is it just the players kind of working out on their own? Are they only in the strength program? And I also think there's a lot of people that don't, and this is true for players, and this is true sometimes for coaches, but there's a lot of I'll just say this, the best teams understand how important the summer is to their program's development. And it's that bridge period between the spring and summer where, as we're going to discuss, Travel, a lot of the characteristics of your football team get built and established. And the teams that have the proper commitment during this period of time are the ones that, in my opinion, a lot of times become the best teams in the country because that is when your football identity is established, not identity from the standpoint of, hey, we run inside zone and run a lot of smash concepts, or, we're a cover two team, or we like the blitz. It's identity as far as what is your DNA as a football team? Are you accountable or not? Do you work or not? Do you have to be pushed or not? Or do you push yourself or not? Those things a lot of times are established over the summer, and part of this show, Trev, is going to be jumping in and explaining why that is, why it's so important, what are they doing, and then when we get into the offense and the defense sections of this portion of the show, we'll talk about what are the things that the offense needs to do for this to be a successful summer period. What are the things that the defense needs to do for this to be a successful summer period? And, I don't know if it's the sexiest topic in the world, but it's a very important topic. And based on how, I've been doing this a while now, and you kind of know what topics you're going to do that just aren't going to have the same numbers as other topics, because some topics don't seem as sexy. And I'd be willing to bet you that our numbers on this show aren't nearly as good as the show we did yesterday, or, when we do the QB preview next Tuesday. But it's a very important topic, and because it's important for the team and how well these next 2 months, because Notre Dame's going to report at the end of July. I believe first day of camp is July 31st, but that's all we're allowed to release about the schedule as of right now. But how the next 2 months go is going to have a big role on who this Notre Dame football team is going to be this fall.
Well, I think you're absolutely right. And look, we've talked a lot so far this offseason about how conditioned Notre Dame's team was all throughout last year. 16-game season. They were able to outlast certain teams that they played. Those building blocks begin in the summer. Well, they begin winter, spring. It's all cogs in the machine, but the summer is so important to getting your body right to go into fall camp, to prepare for a 14, 15, 16 game long season. And that's something that Lauren Landau has excelled in up to this point when, in 1 year of evaluation, he did a really good job of that last year. not too many soft tissue injuries like we saw in 2023. People weren't pulling hamstrings and, having strained muscle this. Some of the injuries were freak injuries. We're going to touch on that on today's show as well. But I think a good place to start, when you start looking at the summer, Brian, is, the strength and conditioning. It helps you prepare for the season. It helps you sustain a level of play all season. And that goes back into what you're talking about, the identity of the team, what we're going to be about, more of the culture building, and strength and conditioning plays a huge role in that going on. Notre Dame released a video of them in the weight room, and Team Glory was plastered all over the back of everybody's t-shirts. That is where that identity starts to form.
Yeah, there's so many important aspects to the strength and conditioning program, Trevor, and part of it is, you'll get into conditioning and building up strength and adding muscle or whatever, but the biggest part is this is where a lot of mental toughness gets formed. This is where a lot of your camaraderie gets formed. This is where, you start getting accountability, and it's not just about showing up, because obviously, you're supposed to show up for mandatory things, and then there's a lot of pressure on you to show up for not mandatory things, but it's more so about what's your mindset like every day, what's your work ethic like every day, your teammates saying, hey man, you're not giving me everything you got today. And then being willing to say that, because a lot of times on teams that aren't as good, players will talk about, hey, did you see so-and-so star player, top player was dogging it today? And they'll sit in the dorm room or sit in the locker room, cafeteria, kind of talking about him. He didn't do this. He didn't do that. It's bull crap that he gets away with that, blah, 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 blah. That's a team that doesn't have a really strong locker room. But then when your third string running back is one to get in the face of your starting running back and say, hey, man, and this is a pure hypothetical. This is not a concern for Notre Dame, and Jeremiah Love's always been known as a hard worker. I'm simply making the point. But, your third string running back gets in the face of your starting running back, and he's like, hey, man, like, you need to bring it today. And he takes it. Or if he doesn't take it, one of the team captains is in his face being like, no, my man was right. Like, we need you to do better and that type of thing. It's even better when it's your leaders that are doing that, when it's your star players that are holding people accountable. And this is a big, important part of that. So that's where a lot of your culture comes from. And that's why the strength coach and the strength staff is so important, because ultimately for the next 2 months, the head football coach of the Notre Dame team, for all intents and purposes, is Lauren Lando, not Marcus Freeman, in regard to that's the guy that's going to spend more time with them than anybody else the next couple months. That's the guy that's going to be with them every day. Now, the nice thing is the coaches can be around more than they were in the past. They can be in the weight room. But what I'm saying is Marcus Freeman is setting the camp agenda, things like that. He has said publicly that he trusts his strength staff to do the things that they believe in a strength program. And so what I mean by that is not that Marcus Freeman's not the leader. It's just that that's the driver of the bus for this portion of the season. And that's what I'm referring to. I do like the fact that coaches can be in weight room now. I mean, you'll see summer videos put out where Marcus Freeman's in a guy's face. And with all due respect, I mean, you're just going to bring it more when the coach is there. So in some ways, that's good. In some ways, it's not as good. And I like the fact that there are still workouts where the coaches aren't around, because I think that's when you don't want to rely on Mike Denbrock to have to be the one to get the other tight ends going, or you don't want to have to rely on Al Washington to push the young defensive lineman or the veteran defensive lineman. It's, hey, who's my leader on the defensive line? Hey, Burnham, are you going to step up? Hey, Junior, are you going to step up? Like, we lost Riley, we lost Howard, you lost RJ Open, who was a good worker. Like, who's going to be that guy? Hey, Drake, there's no Jack Kaiser anymore. Are you going to take that mantle? Yes, of course he will. But, like, you need to see it. But who else? Who's going to have Drake's back? Is it going to be Kingston? Is it going to be Jade? Or does he even need to have his back had because the unit is just putting in that kind of work? Like, those are all aspects of this. There is no Benjamin Morrison and Xavier Watson in the secondary. Is Adon going to really step up and seize that leadership mantle in the right way? That's what this summer period's about, because it happens in the spring and all that. But I think this is the time where true leadership is actually established, because to be a great leader, you've got to be willing to get in your players' faces. You've got to be willing to challenge them when they need challenge. You need to be able to pat them on the butt and tell them, hey, man, it's going to be all good. Maybe take them to lunch because hey, dude's going through something. Like that's not like if you're let's say you're a Don Schuler and you're looking around and one of your safety teammates is just, he's had 2 bad workouts in a row, and you're like, no, that guy brings it every day. I need to talk to him. So sometimes it's get in his face because he's got a bad attitude. Sometimes like, hey man, you good? Like, talk to me. What's going on? Like, 2 days in a row, you haven't been bringing in the weight room. What's going on? You may find out he doesn't want to talk about it, but hey man, I found out my mom's sick. My mom's going through something. My dad's going through something. I got something going on. There's things that could be going on, and part of leadership isn't just crushing a guy. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's like, hey man, what's going on with you? You good? That's what true leadership is. And not every player has that in them. Some guys just are kind of, and that's okay. But you need to be smart enough to know, like, go to the guy that is like that. Like sometimes, Quentin Nelson needed to be able to go to Mike McGlinchey, like, hey man, I think you need to talk to so-and-so. He's not having to, where that's just not, maybe that wasn't, and I'm not saying that's true. I'm just saying like that's an example because you had two captains in the same position with very different leadership styles, both very effective. They're just different. Sometimes McGlinchey might have said to, hey, Q, hey man, I need you to light this room up today. Because they're, and then sometimes it was, Q might have needed to go to McGlinchey and like, hey man, I need you to give like a speech there. I need you to talk to so-and-so today. It's just knowing that leadership. And so all of that's important. It's a very important period. But then, of course, at the end of the day, nothing trumps how they're building their bodies during this period of time. And what you do now is going to have a huge impact on whether or not you're going to be the right team in November and in December and January. Because at the end of the day, Trev, you and I can sit here and talk all we want about how important in-season strength conditioning program is, and it is. But if you're not starting off with a great foundation, which is established over the summer, then you're playing catch-up, which is why guys who are coming off injuries tend to take so long to get caught up because they missed all of that important summer period. So I think from a strength conditioning program, there's so much about your character as a team and individuals and as units, about the culture of the team, about the culture of individual units, sides of the ball. There's a lot of things that go into just building the DNA of your football team. And it's not about X's and O's. It's not about scheme. It's not about position battles. It's about who are we at our core? Who are we going to be when it's the fourth quarter and we're on the road against Miami and we're down 6 and we need a touchdown to win this game? Who are we? Can we dig deep? We're in the postseason and we're down by, Ohio State's beating us by 10 and we've got to, are we just going to lose to them again? Or are we going to really dig deep and be able to find that gear and go out and win this football game like they did against Penn State last year? Like those are the things we're talking about. And when you look at one of the things that Notre Dame was really known for in the Matt Balis era was they were great in the fourth quarter, they were great at home, and they were great in the late in the season, more often than not. And then you look at the year in between Balis and Orlando, and what did we see from Notre Dame? For the most part, not great in the fourth quarter. We're not great in the fourth quarter against Ohio State. We're not great in the fourth quarter against Duke, if we're being honest. Yes, they had that final drive, but they needed a couple miracles pulled out of their you-know-whats to do that. Duke outplayed them in the second half. They blew a 10-0 lead. Got dominated in the second half by Louisville. Got dominated in the second half by Clemson. Like when you were playing good teams, you were getting whooped in the second half. And then you come into this year, and it's a complete opposite story. What was the difference? Well, in the season in between Matt Balis's last year and this year, you had what? You didn't have a strength coach that you got into a rough situation in 2023 where Fred Hale had to take – and he did the best he could. He's still part of the strength program, I believe, but he was thrust into a really tough spot. It's like imagine if your coordinator or your head coach just ups and leaves right before fall camp starts. Somebody's going to have to step up and do the best they can, but they were expecting to have this role. Now they're having to have this role. And it was a lot. And then you come into Orlando's first year and we see what they've done. Now you go into year 2, it's okay. Now it's time to build on that. It's a relatively young team. We've talked about this. A lot of freshmen, especially sophomores and juniors being asked to play key roles. What jumps do they make physically in year 2 and in year 3 for them? Now individually, but year 2 of the strength program, but for themselves, year 2 and year 3. How much can some of the spring freshmen have big jumps? I mean, they're flat out expecting Jadon Blair to play, for example. So how can you get him ready to go and ready to perform at a high level this season physically where he can play a 15, 16-game season? Those are all important aspects as well, Trevor. And that's the part that we all know about. That's the part we think about. But I think those two things they very much go together. They're very important pieces to mesh together where you need both of them. You're building your body You're also building your mind and your character and your toughness and all those things beyond just, boy, that guy looks like $1 million. You and I have seen a lot of weight room warriors over the years that couldn't play football lick. Like you want that guy getting off the bus, but the first time he gets hit in the mouth in a football game, he's faking a hamstring injury. I'm like, I thought you got hit in the head. Yeah, but my hip and I just I don't want this. So that's this is a very important part to developing all that.
Yeah, the latter of what you're talking about is so important. The culture, the character, the self-identity, the team identity, the position group identity. Look, at the end of the day, the summer is the unsexy part about being a collegiate athlete at a big-time school like Notre Dame. In this day and age of college football with NIL, and you're able to make hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars year over year, look, at the end of the day, these are still 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old kids that now make a good chunk of change, rightfully so. But you think about it, they're college students. It's the summer. They don't have classes. They have friends around campus that are going on vacations and going back home, and they're poolside by 10 a.m. and they're out grinding at 7 a.m. This is the unattractive side of college football, but the difference maker as to what type of team you'll be come August, September, October, November. And it's such an important time to your point, Brian, talking about culture and character. And that's why I'm happy that we're having this conversation today. But I'm ready to dive into the offense, specifically.
Before we do that, I just want to say one last thing. I want to kind of go over so people understand kind of what the summer schedule looks like and what they're actually doing over the summer. So we talked about how important it is. I just want to quickly do this, and then we'll get into part 2 of it. But a couple things, and obviously the strength and conditioning program is a big part of it. That's the weight room, but also what they do out on the field. The coaches can be around for a lot of this. What they're not allowed to do is they're not allowed to do as much football-specific stuff, but there is even some of that being worked in. I'm very curious to see if some of the things that they've recommended, there's a proposal for the future that they'd like to bring in sort of a summer, like mini camp type period for college football athletes, which I think would make a lot of sense. All these teams are bringing their kids back for the summer. They're all working out over the summer. All these players are coming back. They're all in class. Why not allow them to have more structure? Because I understand the pushback on it in the past because you're overworking players. You're not I understand all that. You need to have certain regulations, but I think there should be some aspects where you can at least throw helmets on them and go out there and work on football specific things. I say helmets because I still think even in a non-tackling period, there's head-to-head contact that can go on, even in one-on-ones and things like that, where it's just put a helmet on and let them protect themselves. But that's obviously going on. There's also a lot of individual workouts going on with the players where they'll get together, they'll work on routes, they'll work on blocking, they'll work on, lining up on defense, their coverages, the pressures. They're doing specific things together where the receivers hopefully are getting together. They're going over their drills. They're pushing themselves. The leaders are kind of coaching the other guys up. I think that's a great period. That's another part of the leadership thing. It's if you don't have veterans, it doesn't have to be a veteran, but if you don't have players that can coach up the other players in individual workouts, then you're missing something. And so having those type of guys can lead guys through drills is an important period as well. So there's a lot of structure to this period, but it's not all official structure. Some of it's the players thinking of themselves. There's a lot of time being spent in the film room with players going over things. And of course, they're all taking summer school classes as well, which is why a lot of that's why Steve Angeli was able to graduate from Notre Dame after 3 years, because Steve took advantage of the summers at Notre Dame where he was putting in the work in the weight room, but also be able to put in the work in the classroom to get himself ahead of schedule to where he could graduate on time and leave after 3 years with his Notre Dame degree. And my understanding is Steve graduated in May, is my understanding. But we've seen that with a lot of players that have been able to come in and perform that. Jaden Mickey, I believe, who just left Notre Dame, graduated. Jaden Mickey was here for 3 years. Tyson Ford was at Notre Dame for 3 years. He's transferring to Cal with his degree in hand. Jaden Mickey's graduating to Boise State with his degree in hand. Those are guys that were at Notre Dame for 3 seasons. That's it. So this is also an important time for those young men to be able to get closer to the degrees. And I think that's important also because with the transfer portal the way that it is, you want to give some of these players more opportunities to where by your junior year, you're not the guy. You're not the guy. You want to go somewhere else and play. I understand that, but you hope that in these situations, these young men can leave with degrees. So sure, the football piece didn't work out for Steve Angeli at Notre Dame. He got beat out for the starting quarterback job. But he's leaving after 3 years. He's got 2 years of eligibility left. He can go play at Syracuse, and I'll be rooting for the kid to perform there. But he's leaving there with a degree after 3 seasons. Like, that's the important thing. So you talk about the early enrollee aspects. You talk about the summer aspects. Those are important because you're not graduating on time if it's just you're an early enrollee. You're not taking enough classes to graduate. You need those summer periods also. And that's another aspect of it, which adds to the mental grind of the summer. They don't go all the way up to fall camp. I think there's about like a week and a half. There's a couple breaks they'll take. They'll take like a little break over July 4th, I believe. And then they always take – this is based on past history. And then they also will leave for about a week or two before fall camp starts. There's still workouts they're expected to do on their own during that last week or so before camp. But they let them go back home, be with their families, recharge their batteries a little bit before the really long grind begins on July 31st. So I just wanted to add a little bit of specifics about that. Now, I don't know that we're going to have time for a mailbag at the end of the show, but if you guys do want to put some mailbag questions in, you can. And if there's some that are related to this, we may bring them up during the show. So that way we're making sure some of those questions are being addressed. But I know, Trev, those are questions you and I get a lot about what specifically are they doing, who's around, who's allowed to be around, things like that. I want to make sure that we're addressing as much of that as we can. Now we can transition over to the offense. But hey, before we do that, folks, do me a favor. Below Trev, I believe it's below Trev, you're going to see a little thumbs up button. Do us a favor, go ahead and smash that for us. We would greatly appreciate that because it really helps grow the channel. And of course, if you have not done so, go to the boards.irishbreakdown.com. That's our premium message board. It's members only. There's content we put on there that's only for members. Going to have a lot more coming up in June and July, but it's a great place to be where we have a lot of fun talking Notre Dame football. It's where we put a lot of our intel. It's where a lot of our recruiting scoop goes. It's definitely a great place to be. And, of course, it's the absolute best way for you to support Irish Breakdown. You can find that at boards.irishbreakdown.com.
So let's get a little bit more granular with the summer conversation. We're going to start with the offensive side of the ball. There's a lot of different storylines to take away here. Mike Denbrock is now into year 2. There's a lot of returning pieces on offense. There's some key incoming players on offense that we're going to get to see for the first time around the team in summer workouts. But when you look big picture, Brian, when you start talking about the offense, what are some of the focal points of the summer for this side of the ball specifically? That's where this conversation will begin.
So part of this development over the summer, Trev, and it was like this in high school too. I mean, I'm sure you went through this when you were in high school, but it's an important, I mean, really the summer is an important period for all levels of football. And it's not just about building up your bodies and establishing leadership. A lot of it, especially nowadays, is also about the practical aspects of building your team. When you look at the Notre Dame offense, it's going to be different every year what the focal point was. Last year was about getting a brand new quarterback on the same page with a bunch of receivers he hardly threw with so far because of the injury. Well, now you've got 2 quarterbacks that have spent a lot of time throwing to a lot of these receivers, but not all of them, because when you look at it, this is going the summer workouts that began this week. I believe the first time that Notre Dame has had Kenny Minchie, CJ Carr, Blake Hebert together with the wide receiver as it's going to look in 2026. So in the spring, you didn't have Malachi Fields in the spring. You didn't have Micah Gilbert outside of the first. I think he got hurt. If we were at the first practice, he got hurt in like the first 20 minutes of the practice, I believe, if I remember correctly. And because by the time we got done with special teams drills on practice 1, Micah Gilbert was nowhere to be found. And so he had got hurt right away. He's back. Jordan Faison's done with lacrosse, so he's not splitting anymore. And then, of course, now the freshmen have a lot of experience in the system, learning certain things. I mean, if you look at what Scrap Richardson looked like on practice 1, and then you look at what he looked like in the blue gold game, that's a completely different player. That's 12 practices. I mean, Trev, you and I saw him on practice one. You were there, correct? You were at practice one, if I remember.
Yep.
It all gets confusing, but he barely knew how to get into a stance. And he definitely didn't know how to get out of a stance. I mean, he's going through drills like he had never done a receiver drill before because he played quarterback in DB in high school. Like, it's understandable. By the 12th practice, you're like, this cat's a receiver now. He's still very raw, needs a lot of work, but he looked natural. You think of the big catch he made down the field during the 7-on-7 portion of the game, which we don't talk a lot about because it wasn't part of the official blue gold game, but he looked good. He looked different. I don't know that he's going to help the team this year, but you definitely said, okay, the athletic traits are transitioning. What's the big question you have about a quarterback converting to receiver? Can he catch the ball down the field? Quarterbacks tend to have very good hands. You kind of have to have good hands to play quarterback. But there's a difference in being, hey, if you and I are playing catch, I'm one-handed and I'm doing this, I'm doing that. And can I catch the ball full speed, sprinting 40 yards downfield? Can I time my jumps correctly to outplay a guy for the ball? That's a whole different deal than do you have good hands? That's ball skills. Ball skills don't equal just do you have strong hands. So you talk about how much he learned. Well, now he gets to apply that and even go even further with that. Now, all of a sudden, C.J. Carr and Kenny Minchie get to establish their connection with Malachi Fields more. They get Will Pauling full speed this spring, which they did not, or this summer, which they did not have in the spring. So I think the competition at receiver is going to be huge this spring. I think that's going to bring out the best in a lot of these guys. I think Micah Gilbert and Cam Williams being able to train behind Malachi Fields is going to be huge. He was a captain for Virginia last year. Being able to see what Will Pauling and Jaden Greathouse are doing on a daily basis from a work ethic standpoint is going to be great for those younger players. And then you obviously have that, but being able to work as a unit for the next month and a half, 2 months is going to be huge to get this team rolling. So once you get to, July 31st, August 1st, August 2nd, those early, practices of the summer, it's not, hey, I'm CJ Carr. Nice to meet you. Hi, I'm Malachi Fields. Can't wait to work with you. That's what it's like at the D3 level. I mean, our freshmen are meeting and our transfers are meeting their teammates the first day of fall camp for the most part, unless they live near each other. And what's nice here is they get a good 2 months of work together. And so that's going to be a huge part for the offense, really making sure that you're able to put in the work and say, hey, this is who we are. This is what we do. Malachi can learn the offense. CJ and Kenny can work with him there. Same with Will Pauling, and really get them caught up to speed. I think that's priority number one for me when it comes to what the offense needs to do. There's a lot of other important things, Trev, but I don't know that there's anything more important than that, than the quarterbacks and receivers getting on the same page. And now the nice thing is now you have quarterbacks that know the offense, where last year it was. In some degrees, you had the receivers kind of bringing the quarterback along early on. You had younger quarterbacks bringing the starting quarterback along. Now it's two young guys that have been in the system for 2 years that are able to kind of start taking a little bit more ownership from a schematic standpoint, which I think is great for them as well, because they've got to be the coaches. They've got to make the play calls. They've got to do those things. And I think that's a big part. Like, I don't know if Notre Dame scripts things out for them. I would tell them to do it themselves. Like with young quarterbacks, maybe there might be some times where I might help them script it out, but I'd want to say, no, you know what we do. You know what we're trying to do. Like, let's go learn it at least part of the time. I think that would be very good for the two young quarterbacks.
Yeah, the receiving room being able to build continuity and cohesiveness this offseason from now until July 31st is going to be absolutely huge. Because now everybody's around. You were running with a makeshift skeleton crew, partially due to injuries and some of it due to some people not being here yet on campus. Now you have everybody in full force. I'm excited to see what Elijah Burris is going to do. Can he build off of his spring? Can he put some more time in the weight room, get even more explosive, get even bigger, learn behind Malachi Fields, learn behind Will Pauling, continue to learn under Jaden Greathouse. Will Pauling's now back up to 100% speed. Micah Gilbert is somebody that I wholeheartedly believe we are going to have a lot. He was going to be a hot topic of conversation coming out of the spring if he didn't get hurt. So now I'm forecasting that, a lot of the conversation we were going to have about him in the spring, I think we're going to have a little bit more of in the summer and into fall camp. Not as much because Malachi Fields is here. Micah Gilbert's probably going to be the guy rotating in at the boundary position. but he's still somebody that's going to draw some attention, and I'm excited to see what he does with it. And then you have players like KK Smith and Cam Williams, where it's like, hey, now's the time. The receiving room is together. You two possess a skill set that not a lot of other players on this roster have. What kind of jump can you make post-spring to the start of fall camp? And so the receiver room, I'm with you. That's a really, really important facet to this offense this spring, because how big of a jump they make is going to determine how successful a young quarterback is going to be. How cohesive they play is going to dictate the level of consistency that they're able to play at week in and week out. That's something that I've been harping on this group on for a couple seasons now, is the consistency. Because we've seen games in the past where this is the receiving core that we thought we were going to see. And then there's other weeks where it's like, hey, where'd that receiving core go? And so now is a really good time to establish the identity in Mike Brown's receiving room. And I'm excited to watch it unfold as the summer goes on.
I mean, when guys have breakouts, it's not always the case, but there's definitely times when you want to see, you'll start to see it during the summer. And you talk about Elijah Burris, the guy for me is Cam Williams. Like, that's who I want to see really take that step. That's who I think needs to benefit the most from. Like, I put an article out today at Irish Breakdown where when we interviewed Marcus Freeman last week, I'm asking about the receiving core and what he liked about Will Pauling and Micah Fields, and he starts talking about how tough they are. He starts talking about how, and I was like, why did I ask a defensive coordinator linebacker this question? Like, I don't understand. Like, and he starts talking about, like, he's watching film and how when Virginia would run screens that weren't going to Malachi, they would put him at the point of attack where he's the lead blocker on a lot of their screens. And he's like, that taught me some. And he goes, of course he's a game changer and he wins one on. And it's just like, but man, he's so tough. And it's like, why did I ask him this question? That's exactly what I should have expected from Marcus Freeman. Like, it's like, know your audience, right? Like, know you're asking it. But the point was, it's like he got that reputation, and he's doing that because he's a worker, because he's got a team first attitude, and he knows how to use his size and his speed to dominate. Well, that's something that Micah and Cam need to learn from. And Micah, especially coming back from the injury, missing that opportunity to get those extra reps this spring, he's got to get caught up to speed. But I think Cam and Micah learning from Malachi Fields and vice versa is something that, from them, it's learning the offense and things like that. But I think that's going to be big for those young players, and you hope that his presence can raise their level of play. You hope that the presence of Will Pauling, forces Jordan Faison, Jaden Greathouse to really step up their game, of course, but also you hope that the presence of Will Pauling makes KK Smith say, hey, man, if you want to play at Notre Dame, this is your shot. You better go out there and put in the work to become that guy. And you start to separate, I can't even think of a better term other than get biblical, but start to separate the wheat from the chaff. You know what I mean? Like, it's who wants to win and who doesn't, who wants to be a champion and who doesn't, who wants to dominate, who wants to just be along for the ride. You start to learn those things over the summer. And I think that's going to be something for the receiving core that's going to be a huge part of what they're doing this year. Huge part.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you already touched on it, but now the connection that they're going to be able to build with the quarterbacks that are on campus is going to be absolutely crucial. Because in the last season, we saw what the repercussions were of, quarterback getting somewhat of a late start. Not his fault. He had to get some things cleaned up. Then obviously it ended up working out in a different fashion. Notre Dame played for a national championship last season.
But that one part of his game, I'm sorry, you were about to say it. I just couldn't help myself. I started getting excited. Go ahead, Trev.
No, you're good, man. But if there was one aspect of the Riley Leonard play from 2024 that needed to be improved to get over that hump, it was the connection with the wide receivers. We're talking about a team that didn't have a passing touchdown for the first 3 games of the season. That's something that I would be beyond astonished if that happened this season. And look, I'm not just saying the summer is the only reason why that happened, but it's a big part. It is a factor in not being able to build chemistry with those guys. Brian, would you say that it is an easier transition for a wide receiver to get caught up to speed with quarterbacks that already know the system opposed to the inverse?
Oh, absolutely. Because it's with Malachi, for example, he's got to learn the offense, and he's just got to learn this is how Kenny throws and this is how CJ throws. I mean, yeah, you're going to catch some balls from Blake Hebert, but you've got to learn how CJ and Kenny throw. Kenny's arm angle is different than CJ's. What does that mean? the spin rate is different for the two quarterbacks. One guy's ball tends to sail, one guy's ball tends to drive down. Hypothetically, I don't know that there's a giant difference in these two quarterbacks, but that in theory is kind of part of the deal. It's, like, for example, if you were a new receiver coming into play for Notre Dame in 2015, left-handed throw from Malik Zaire, right-handed throw from Deshaun Kaiser. Deshaun's balls tended to kind of nosedive. They would, the way his throwing motion, he had a very much a pitcher's motion, and so the ball would kind of drive down. Malik's ball tended to kind of stay on level or rise a little bit. Those things you're getting used to, but it's one guy learning that, and you catch a million balls from them. Whereas for a quarterback, it's there's so many different things because the receiver just has to run his route. You got 8 different receivers that run their routes. It's the quarterback who has to learn how each guy likes the ball, how each guy finishes. I've got to know where I got to lead KK Smith on a post route and where I got to lead Jerome Bettis Jr. on a post route, or Jack Larson on a post route, or Eli Rarid on a post route. Like, because with KK, if I lead him the same way I do Jerome Bettis, that ball's underthrown. If I lead Jerome Bettis the way that I do KK, that ball's overthrown. So it's not always about, well, when you throw a post route, you want to throw the ball 17 yards in front. No, because some guys 17 yards, they're so fast, they're waiting on it. And so you're getting used to that. Who is good at back shoulder? How do guys like back shoulders? Not everybody likes a back shoulder the same way. Some guys like a back shoulder to be high and above their head. They want to go up and get it. Some guys want it. They got really nice hips. They can really flip their hips around and make a catch that's more outside on the sideline. Those are just different things that you need to do. This Malachi Fields, if I'm throwing a jump ball in the back of the end zone, I'm going to throw the ball a whole lot differently than if I'm throwing it to KK Smith. Because for KK, it's higher, but you've got to get it on the back shoulder, where with Malachi, just throw it high. Just let him go out, jump that guy. And then if Mike Brown's the coach that I think he is, he's going to teach him what all good receivers coaches do, where if you catch it high and you're square to the defender and you're coming down, you don't come down here, you keep the ball higher, you put it over your head where he can't knock it away. So what we would work on when I was coaching is we would catch it, put it behind your head if you were catching a ball like that. You never do that actually in a game. But if you're thinking about that, you at least get it over your head. Those are things you need to work on, where with KK, you may not throw the ball like that because this game is very different. And I'm using those two as an example, not to bang on KK, but like they're the two most distinctly different body types of the receiving corps. Their games are very different, with 6'4", 220-pound Malachi Fields and 5'11", 175-pound KK Smith. It's just, but at the same time, if you're leading Malachi the same way you might KK on a go route, that ball might be slightly overthrown because KK is really fast. And so that's what a quarterback has to learn, all of that. How I throw the ball to Eli Rarid may not be how I throw the ball to Jack Larson. You've got to know that. You've got to know who likes the ball at certain spots, who's willing to go down and get it, and who isn't. And those are all parts of what you do. Who's the guy that on slant routes body catches? And I know I got to throw the ball into his hip, because if I throw it into the chest of a guy who body catches, that ball is going to go floating up in the air. So I got to get on the back hip, or if he drops it, it kind of goes down, and who are the guys that really can go get it? So, who are the guys that are really good in traffic? You got to learn that, because you're going to throw the ball to certain guys in traffic. Other guys, you try to throw them the ball in traffic, pick. So those are all parts of what a quarterback has to learn. Is you have 8 receivers. They're going to be 8 different players. They're going to play the game 8 different ways. And it's up for a quarterback to understand a curl route's not a curl route's not a curl route for all 8 of your players. Some guys are faster in and out of their break. If you have a guy that's really choppy in his curl route, he may be open, but you got to know split second later, you got to throw the ball. Because if you throw the ball the same time you do a guy that's really quick, boom, in and out of his break, boom, it's going to hit him right in the face, right? Where if you wait that extra second for a guy that's really quick, like Jordan Faison is really quick in and out of breaks. And so if you wait on him the way you might a bigger player like Malachi Fields, that ball may get there late. If you throw the ball as quick to Malachi Fields, you do Jordan Faison, that ball's going to get on him in a hurry. Those are all things that a quarterback has to learn. When you talk about, and whereas a receiver just has to learn 1 or 2 quarterbacks throwing styles, but then he's just got to go play. I just got to go be me.
Yeah.
It's up to you as the quarterback to understand what I'm good at or what I'm not good at. So I think that's why it's much harder for a quarterback, and that's why it is important that I get that CJ Carr and Kenny Minchey are not returning starters, but that's why I don't think the pass game early in the season is somehow going to be worse than it was early last season, because they are having that time. I mean, the number of balls that CJ Carr has thrown to, I'm just using an example, to Micah Gilbert and KK Smith and Jaden Greathouse and Jordan Faison, compared to and same thing for Kenny Minchey, and the same thing for, or the number that they threw compared to what Riley did last year to those guys, by the time you got to the summer, it's way different. And Riley wasn't even 100% when the summer started last year. So that's the advantage that those guys have. But now's the time they got to build that connection with Malachi, and even more so with Will Pauling. Now that you have Will Pauling at full speed, you've got to really understand that CJ has thrown a lot more balls to Cam Williams than he has to Micah Gilbert.
Yeah.
Because Micah was out. So now you guys have got to, you and Kenny got to get up more on the same page with him. So those are all parts of what the development is like, and why this is such an important period for that position group and that to group together. And you can throw the tight ends in there as well. It's the same thing with them. And like Ty Washington is a guy we throw in there for them. It's he's got to step up and really have a good spring and get used to the quarterbacks and those type of things. So you could throw all of them in there, but it's much tougher for the quarterbacks to learn those guys, which is why it's so important that right now everybody's healthy and everybody's there.
Yep. Absolutely.
I would assume that the first pass that CJ Carr or Kenny Minchey throws to James Flanagan this week will be the first pass that CJ Carr and Kenny Minchey have thrown to James Flanagan. Same with Malachi Fields, I would think. Maybe he got some workouts in when he was visiting, but you get what I'm saying, like in this type of setting.
Yeah, absolutely. Sticking on the theme here of tight ends, they're another position group that we're going to be watching relatively closely as the summer goes on. Not so much at the top. It's a different conversation than where we're at with the receivers. Wide receivers, Malachi Fields, he's drawn a lot of attention. He's a top newcomer. He was a top portal target for Notre Dame. He's expected to come in and change the landscape of what that room is, in addition with the pieces that they already have. Tight end, they have an established number one tight end, and it's Eli Raridan. He needs to, of course, stay healthy, continue to grow, and build on his spring. But a lot of the questions that we have in that position room are what comes after Eli Raridan. And that is what's going to be interesting to watch unfold up until July 31st and then well into fall camp. Because right now, as we know, Cooper Flanagan probably not going to play many, if at all, snaps in the regular season for Notre Dame this year. He's still coming back from his injury. So what does the room look like? Well, you have Kevin Bauman, who is a 6-year senior, has battled his fair share of injuries, but he stayed relatively healthy over the last season and then last spring. He had a pretty good blue gold game. He had one of the beautiful catches on the sideline delivered from CJ Carr. You have Jack Larson, who is going into his eligibility-wise redshirt freshman, but sophomore year of school at Notre Dame. Excuse me. And then you have a couple players that Brian has already mentioned. You have Ty Washington. He's going to be on campus now. He's the transfer from Arkansas. James Flanagan is also on campus now as well. So what will the pecking order start to look like in that tight end room? How will they start to build their chemistry? Because as history has shown us, Notre Dame, regardless of who the offensive coordinator has been, plays multiple tight ends. We saw that under Chip Long. We saw that under Tommy Rees. We saw that under Jared Parker. We saw that under Mike Denbrock last season. Now, Denbrock has a tendency to lean more into, okay, these are the strengths of the offense this year. We're going to play those. But Mike Denbrock is also the tight end position coach. And so there will be formations where Notre Dame will still line up in 12 personnel. Who starts to rotate in is that second tight end? Will it be Kevin Bauman? Now, this question won't fully be answered in July because they're not lining up in team periods. They're not going through those type of deals. But what kind of summer will Ty Washington have? What type of summer will Jack Larson have?
That's the key, right? It's growth. It's not first team, second team, third team. You're correct. It's about putting yourself in position that when fall camp starts, you're ready to seize hold of a position. 100% correct. Jack Larson, it's built on how you finish the spring. With Ty Washington, it's the same thing as the other guys. You've got to get caught up to speed. And for him, there's even more on him because he doesn't have the proven track record that Will Pauling and Malachi Fields have. And so he's got a lot to prove. And, Kevin Bauman, his summer goals, he's got one summer goal: stay healthy. Like, that's literally the only thing we need to see from Kevin Bauman, because we know he can do some things if he's healthy. Same thing with Eli Raridan. Those guys just got to stay healthy. The depth there, the key to the tight end position is those two staying healthy. Just keep doing what you're doing. But it's Jack Larson taking a step this summer, and it's Ty Washington getting as acclimated as possible over the next month and a half. Those are very, very keys to the tight end depth chart. If we hear good things about Jack and Ty really stepping up this spring or this summer, then I'm going to feel a lot better about the tight end room, Trev, because I'll be honest, I think James Flanagan can help you right now. But I want James Flanagan to play because he earned it, not because you had to play him because injuries and other guys didn't step up. I don't want to have to deal with that. That's not the ideal situation. I want James to be on the field this year because Ty had a great summer in fall camp. Jack had a great summer. Kevin Bauman had a great summer, but James Flanagan was too good not to play. That's what you want. And then if he doesn't play, it's because, well, great summer for Ty and great summer for Jack, and you feel a lot better about where that room is, because that's probably that might be my biggest question mark on the entire team from a depth standpoint. Tight end.
Yeah. Yep. Tight end is right up there for me. Definitely on the offensive side of the ball. It has the most questions for me around what does the depth look like after Eli Raridan. And then yes, we saw Eli Raridan fully healthy all last season. We saw him healthy throughout the winter and the spring into now. But you do still have that lingering thought of like, okay, and this is something that the coaching staff has to prepare for, if he does go down, what's the pecking order after him? The foundation of that starts to get laid in the summer. And to your point, it's in different lights. Jack Larson has to build, and James Flanagan and Ty Washington have to get acclimated to what this Notre Dame offense is going to be about. Different lights. James Flanagan also has to balance the getting caught up to the collegiate athlete speed as well, because some of the guys he's going to be going against, lining up against a Notre Dame safety, a Notre Dame linebacker, Notre Dame nickel. It's going to be a little different than what he faced in high school, as well as getting acclimated to the playbook, the rest of the room, developing his relationship with the quarterbacks. Ty Washington is going to have to use the experience he had playing in the SEC and against teams like Alabama, against teams like Ole Miss, against teams like Tennessee, use that as his foundation, but still in the same light, get acclimated to what the Notre Dame tight end position is about. So watching that begin to unfold in the summer is going to be something that's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out. Brian, any final thoughts on the tight end position for this summer? Okay. There is one more position that I am kind of interested to see what happens with them this summer. And it's a different conversation than what we've had with the first two, than wide receivers and tight ends. But I'm also going to be paying attention to the chemistry of what the offensive line room is, because Notre Dame is in an interesting spot with this group. All 5 guys that are projected to start as of right now started games in 2024, but the combination of this 5 have not done it together. Emil Wagner had 16 starts last season. Billy Schrauth now has 15 career starts. Anthony Knapp has 15 career starts. Ashton Craig has 6. Charles Jagasaw has 2. However, Charles Jagasaw has 2 starts, not at the position that he's slated to start at right guard, but he did play the rest of the first half and the entire second half against Penn State. So their chemistry that they build over the offseason, in the summer specifically, offensive line is one of the bigger positions that I think of building chemistry through things like the weight room and offseason film sessions and the camaraderie being around each other, because they are the one position on offense that have to move and play well together as a unit. So watching them, one, stay healthy, because one of the reasons why we didn't see them together a lot in the spring was because of health. Anthony Knapp's got to stay healthy. Billy Schrauth has to stay healthy. Ashton Craig has to stay healthy. Charles Jagasaw has to stay healthy. Then, of course, Emil Wagner played 973 snaps last season. So he also has to stay healthy with the workload that he had. But watching them build out their chemistry as a 5-man unit is going to be big.
And I like the fact that Notre Dame chose to let Emil get some of his rest and recovery time in the spring.
Yep.
Knowing that it meant missed reps as opposed to the summer. Because you don't want your summer to be your rest and relaxation period. That's when you're getting ready for the season. And if you would have pushed him, hey, you're a starter, we need you to be around every day and practice as hard and do all that, where would he be right now? I don't know the answer to that question. So I want to see that part of it. But to your point, Anthony Knapp getting back to full speed as he kind of got late into the summer. I mean, in the spring practice, still he was able to go. Where's Gerby at in his recovery? Is he going to be able to give you anything this summer as far as working out? Getting the freshmen to take that next step. But it's really comes down to getting Jagasol fully good to go health-wise, Knapp fully good to go health-wise, Ashton Craig good to go health-wise. Billy Schrouth dealt with some stuff. So this is a pretty beat-up unit by the end of the year and in the spring brawl. So getting them all back and healthy is important. But as you said, we talked about the receiving core and how this is going to be the first time they're all together. This is the first time the offensive line is going to be all together in its expected form. I don't think they've taken a single practice snap ever together because Ashton Craig was out all spring, where it was this lineup together. We saw potentially 4 of them together because we did see in the spring Emil and Anthony Knapp and those guys ready to play, but it was a little bit different. And so you need to see them come together. Cohesion, leadership. It's a big period for leadership. Can Emil continue to take? I think him and Billy both need to kind of be leaders. I like having a couple leaders in the room. They can have different personalities. Emil strikes me as they all need to be hard workers, but Emil strikes me as just kind of being around him a little bit at practices and listening to him talk and things I hear about him, from my sources inside the program. He strikes me as more of like the Mike McGlinchey type of leader, smart, will talk, will give the inspirational speeches, will talk to guys. Like Billy's a little bit more of that grinder type. And then as we've talked about before, I know you've talked about it, I know Vince has talked about it. When you talk to the players in different interviews and you ask them about leadership, a lot of them point to Ashton Craig. So for him, it's hard to lead when you're not there. Now he gets to be back there. How does he then assert himself? So I think all those things are very important as you start to look at the spring and think about what this offensive line is going to be, because they will do offensive line work together. It's not like 11 on 11 stuff, but they're going to be working on timing. You don't need a defense to work on timing together. And timing is a lot of things. It's getting into your snap. It's about the center. It's about the centers working on mixing up their snaps. Because what you can't do is snap, clap, second, snap. Clap, a second, snap. It's up to the center nowadays. It used to be up to the quarterback to delay the cadence to try to get teams. Now it's the center that's got to say, okay, it's what, you've got to have proper timing. It's about that. It's about getting them on the same page as far as getting off the line at the snap. You want them coming off as one. It's about working on double teams and how quickly. I've got to get a feel. Anthony Knapp's got to get a feel for when Billy Schrouth is good to take a guy over and vice versa when they're working the other way. Jagasol and Emil Wagner need that. And Jagasol and Wagner need even more work than Knapp and Schrouth, because Knapp and Schrouth had almost half a season to work on that together. Wagner and Jagasol played a half a game together, side by side against Penn State. And then neither Schrouth nor Jagasol has a whole lot of work with Ashton Craig, because Ashton's only had 6 starts in his career, and he's been out for a while. Jagasol's never had a start with Ashton Craig next to him. He started a game with him 2 people over, but he was out last year when he came back late. So getting everybody on the same page, when to get to the second level, all those type of things is all part of it. Communication when working on stunts, line stunts, that's a big thing that they can spend a lot of time on this summer working on. And it's just them going against each other. It's not going to be fast. It's not going to be as fast as when Boubacar's doing it, or Bryce Young's doing it, or Josh Burnham's doing it, or Logan Thomas is doing it. But it's about the communication and seeing it. Okay, this is when this happens. Because what happened last year, it's not that they were too slow to react to it a lot of time. It's like they didn't react to it at all. They didn't see it. So working on that is going to be a big part of what we see this summer as well.
100%. Yeah, absolutely agree. Brian, any final thoughts on the offense before we move over to defense?
I think is going to be the biggest topic of conversation until we get updated rosters. What's Knapp and Wagner weigh? Yeah. I'll bet you $20 that's the question I get asked more than anything else about the Notre Dame offense this summer. How much does a Wagner and Knapp need to weigh? How much do they weigh? And so I just want him to get to 300 just so I can stop asking about it. Like if he's, just get to 300. And I don't care if Anthony Knapp is not even 300 pounds. Just put him at 300 pounds on the roster so I don't have to keep answering questions about is he big enough or whatever else. It's like I'm more worried about Emil with that than I am Anthony. But Emil did look more filled out in the upper body this spring. But for him, it's just going to be about really building up that lower body this summer. That's going to be the key for Emil.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm with you. I'd take you up on that $20 bet too. I'd absolutely would. Well, all right, folks, that's going to do it for the offensive segment of today's show, but don't go anywhere. We are getting ready to break down the defensive summer. But before we get there, you guys know what to do. Be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, share this podcast with your friends and family. And as always, the best way to support what we do here, you see it scrolling down there at the bottom of the screen. Subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Give the Championship Lounge a good look, because a lot of the questions that we get in mailbags, a lot of the stuff that we get in buy, sell, holds, which is also just for premium message board members, a lot of that intel gets dropped on the message boards. It's not on the free website. It's at boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right, Brian, we are going to wrap up the summer portion of today's show by talking about the defensive side of the ball. Similar conversation to what we had on the offensive side, because each team has to establish some different things. For the offense, it was kind of getting people acclimated. Yes, health was a part of it, but you're talking about guys like Malachi Fields, players like that. For the defense, people got to get back to health. There's significant, I don't want to label it as significant, like they're just absolutely, ravaged by injuries, but there are significant injuries and significant players who are coming back off of the injury list this summer for this team. Health is the number one priority for them this summer.
Dude, there's no position on the roster where it's more of a conversation about, okay, are you healthy? Can you go? Than the defensive line. And the reality is that's the one position where you're just not going to get your anticipated group to be 100%. Mm-hmm. Boubacar Traore is not far enough away from his injury to be able to go full go right now, but Toho's not. And that's just the reality of it. And I don't know about Logan Thomas. I don't know that his injury was severe enough to where it's going to continue, into this period of time. But the reality is this, man, they've got to get the work in when they can, but it's going to really be about, Burnham and Tuihalamaka really stepping up as leaders on the D-line. And it's going to be about Bryce Young really taking his game. Bryce Young and Logan Thomas taking their games to another level is key. Because, look, I think we know what to expect from Josh Burnham and Junior Tuihalamaka to a degree. Just continued development of quality seasons in 2024. The success of this team is going to be about the two injured guys coming back and getting back to their old form, at least one of the two. But it's also about the two sophomores got to take a jump. And from a strength standpoint, from a technique standpoint and all that, that's going to be a huge part of what we see from this group this summer. Those two guys have got to really step up and become impact players to some degree for Notre Dame.
Yeah, the defensive line is home to a lot of those conversations. It's not injury per se, but another two guys that I'm going to be keeping an eye on is Gabe Rubio and Jason Onye. We're talking about two guys who haven't gone through the full regime of, preseason, fall camp, in season, winter, spring, and then back in that rotation again. Gabe Rubio, I believe at this time last year, just kind of came back to the team and then unfortunately got hurt in fall camp because he missed the spring because he was dealing with a personal issue. Jason Onye was there in the spring and then summer, fall camp, but then obviously we know what happened in season, and then he wasn't a part of the team after the latter part of the regular season. So those are two other guys, two key pieces along the inside of the defensive line. It's like, okay, now you are going through a full off-season regime. Gabe Rubio, can you stay healthy? Jason Onye, you put on good weight. Can you maintain that? Can you maintain that level of play? Where are those players' minds at in terms of what their workload is going to be this season? And so along the defensive line, on top of the injuries and the players coming back off of injury, remaining healthy for this period of time, I'm also keeping my eye a little bit on those two guys as well to see how their summers go.
Yeah. Trev, a guy that I'm really curious to see this summer, Cole Mullins.
Mm.
That could be a wild card in the D line, especially at the end position. Because here's the thing that's a little different. The DN position is no longer about Viper and big end. And that matters because a Viper had a different role, different techniques, different calls than the big end. Now it's left and right. It's the same. It's the same calls. You just got to know what's your side call. Are you have a tight end to your side or are you open? Those things are going to determine where you line up based on the calls. You've got to know how to set the edge no matter what the situation is. So it's a lot easier now for them to get a variety of matchups. It's not going to be any kind of position change to get Bryce Young and Josh Burnham on the field together, for example, where last year it required a position change because you had to learn different techniques, different alignments, different calls in those two positions. And the way that the defensive end was used, especially last season, was more of a edge setter, gap, filler, like you were occupying space. You weren't necessarily being turned loose last season the way that they did with Javonte Jean-Baptiste the year before. So that's going to be an important piece of this to where you're not going to be impacted by the Viper injuries in the same way you were last year, in that you have to move someone over, and that means you need to find a replacement for those guys. However, you are looking at it saying you've got Burnham, Bryce, Tuihalamaka, Logan Thomas as really the four healthy ends that played last season. Cole Mullins didn't. If he can emerge and give you some legitimate end swing, maybe move inside on passing situations type of a look, man, that helps you really get to the point where you feel like the depth is solidified early on until Jordan and Boubacar can come back. That's going to be a big piece to this. I think he is a key to really solidifying the depth chart for the Notre Dame defensive ends until those veteran players come back. Because I don't know if any of the freshmen are guys that I look at and say that guy's got to help them right now, or can help them right now. I think they're all to different degrees works in progress. With Burgess, it's more about technical stuff. With Reef and Hulak, they got to get bigger and stronger. Now, a guy could force his way on the field, but that's okay. Love that. But you don't want to have to play one of those guys. And if Cole Mullins can't go at end, then you're sitting here where if there's one injury, now all of a sudden a freshman has to be in your two deep until Botelho and Boubacar can come back. And I don't think either one of those guys is going to be healthy until middle of the season. Like healthy to where like they're taking normal starter type of reps. I don't think that's going to be the case in September, or maybe not even in October, but it's going to be a while before Boubacar is able to give you the volume he gave you, for example, like against Miami of Ohio. Battelle gave you the volume he gave you against Texas A&M. It's going to be a little while for that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you brought up Cole Mullins, man. He was somebody that jumped out to me in spring, and I didn't even get to see him practice on the interior of the defensive line like what you did or Vince or Sean did. And so the thing that I noticed about him is just when he's out on the end, he looks very comfortable in where he is. I don't have to see what he looked like on the interior of the defensive line to recognize when a player is comfier, more comfortable with his skill set at a position. And so you talk about being physically ready to play. I mean, we're talking about a kid that's 6'5", he's 262. He's absolutely ready to come in and contribute. If he can stay healthy, build off of the spring that he had, because for much of the blue gold game, he was going up against Anthony Knapp. Look, man, say what you want about Anthony Knapp. He started for 15 games for Notre Dame when they went on a 14-1 run, essentially. Rattled off 13 games in a row. He was your starting left tackle, and Cole Mullins more than held his own against him. And so be really interested to see what kind of step he takes physically, mentally over the summer, because he, to your point, could be in a prime position to solidify himself somewhere in that defensive end rotation, especially with Boubacar and Jordan Botelho still coming back off of injury. So that's going to be something to keep an eye on as well. Another one that we're going to be keeping an eye on over the course of the summer is going to be the linebacker depth, which is another interesting topic of conversation. So, Brian, you're somebody that's been really high on this linebacker room this offseason. When you look at the summer, where does that shake out for you?
Like, we go into the summer knowing who's going to play. We know for the most part. We know Drake's going to play. We know Kingston's going to play. We know Jalen Seed's going to play. We know that Jaden Osbury's going to play. There's two questions that I have. One is, does the linebacker depth rotation go beyond those four? Can Preston Zinner earn a role, whether that's in the two deep at linebacker or as a, like we saw him in the spring game as sort of an edge rusher? Can Bodie Cahoon earn a role? Can Madden Faremo earn a role? Can Teddy Rizak earn a role? Could Teddy have the kind of growth where, maybe he you say, hey, there's some 3 linebacker sets we like because Teddy's big enough now to play linebacker, but he also runs well enough for us to, against some 12 personnel where, maybe Teddy can have a role. Or is it Jaden Osbury that kind of takes on that third linebacker role, or Jalen Snead or Kingston? There's a lot of things about the rotation that are going to get worked out this summer as far as who's in the rotation. And then the second part of that kind of goes together. We know who's going to play. We don't know who's going to dominate the reps other than Drake Bowen. Like, look, Drake's Bowen's going to be one of the top 2 snap getters at linebacker, barring injury. It just deal with it. For those of you that don't think that should be the case, deal with it. He's an outstanding talent, and he's going to get better and better. With Drake, there's things he's got to prove this summer, but it's like I kind of feel like he's going to. I just have faith that Drake's going to do that. The other part is, okay, but who starts next to him? What's Kingston's? And this is probably individually the biggest question is, what role does Kingston Viliama-Asa earn this offseason? Like that to me. Look, everybody knows I love Jaden Osbury, and he proved last year that kid's a football player, and he's going to play. He's going to be a factor. Jalen Snead at the very least is a really good niche player, the very least. But I believe the difference between Notre Dame having a top 5 linebacker room and the best linebacker room is, does Kingston force himself into the rotation with Drake? I know there's some people kind of rooting for Kingston to beat Drake out. I'll be shocked if that happens. And I don't know that that's what the coaching staff is looking for. I think there's a, and we saw it, and I say this not because anyone's told me this or I've got intel. I watched it last year. They were forcing the issue at times with getting Drake and Kingston side by side. And I know how the staff feels about all the linebackers, but I really feel like, and they're all going to play. So I'm giving you my opinion here. This is not staff intel, anything like that. I feel that there's a reason that they put those 2 guys together as much as they did last year. It's because, and I remember, I think it was with Vince early in the season, I didn't remember the first time we saw at a home game Drake and Kingston side by side. I looked over and I said to Vince, I said, like, that's the future of the linebacker room right there. And I think that's still the key for me, is I still think those 2 guys side by side as the Kaiser Bowen 1-2 punch, like, everyone's going to play a bunch, but there's 2 guys that are going to, I think you ideally want to kind of dominate the reps. 600 for Drake, 600 for Kingston, 400 for Jaden, 400 for Jalen, like that kind of thing. Is if Kingston can just be too good this season to stay off the field, where you got to start him, and maybe that means he also plays Mike, or maybe that then thrusts Bodie Cahoon into sort of a rotating in with him, or maybe Jaden Osbury can play some Mike snaps against certain teams. I don't know what that's going to look like, but if Kingston Viliama-Asa forces Notre Dame to start him this year, and it's Drake and Kingston side by side, that's where I say, okay, now I think the linebacker room can become elite.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm with you. And for me, that was my biggest question walking away out of the spring. Loved what I saw from the linebacker position, but you and I talked a lot offline. Like when I was up in South Bend, we would talk about this. I felt like nobody separated themselves. Like, okay, that's going to be the next starting will linebacker. And so that groundwork is going to start to get laid over the course of the summer. But I'm with you. I think unlocking what Kingston's potential could be and having that duo of Kingston and Drake on the field together at the same time would put this linebacker room over the top. Unlike Lindy Sports, who just didn't even rank them in the top 10. Different discussion for a different day. I just had to get that jab in there. Now, with that being said, I am also
I'm sorry.
interested.
I got to say that. It is still ridiculous that they weren't ranked as a top 10 linebacker room.
Yeah. Yeah, I wrote an article this morning that's coming out tomorrow about Drake being the number 11th ranked inside linebacker in the country, has a case to be higher. And then I remembered that they weren't even ranked as a top 10 unit. So different beef for a different show, perhaps, but had to get that in there. But another player that I will be watching on as well, along with the guys that you mentioned, and you also mentioned him as well, Madden Faremo is somebody that when I saw him in practice for the first time, you've told stories before about how when you just look at a guy, you could just tell they move a little bit different than what some of the other kids do in the room. Madden Faremo was that for me, watching him go through individual drills at linebacker. His thing was just the football player aspect. There were times in the spring where he kind of just didn't know the sideline from the end zone. But I'm telling you, man, once that light bulb goes on, Max Bulla and Chris Ash are going to be faced with the task of like, okay, we have 5 linebackers that can all play right now. Arguably more when you factor in Rezak and Zinter and Cahoon, and now you have Faremo, spoil of riches in the linebacker room. Kahanu Kia is also coming back, who in last year's blue gold game was all over the field and led the defensive tackles. And so what is that rotation? What's that depth going to round out to be? That's going to be something that I'll be watching closely as this offseason goes on as well. Now, I do have one question for you real quick. Last thing about the linebackers. For building out this rotation, we talked about what we wanted to see, but what does that actually look like for you? How would you interpret it in the summer, seeing Kingston take that next step?
It's about positioning themselves for fall camp. It's about Kingston being in great shape and really working on his footwork. Like Kingston's he doesn't look like it. He looks like you'd think an old school Mike would look. He's got real thick calves and thick lower body, and he's got sort of a little bit of a Manti Te'o type of build to him, but he moves really smooth and clean when his footwork is correct. So just getting him to clean up some things there. It's about him getting in great position, conditioning, just getting a little bit more of a burst as his body, because like he was an 18-year-old last year. And I think all of us know, anyone that played sports, at least when your 18-year-old body looked a lot different than your 21-year-old body. If you were putting into work, you're thicker, you're stronger, and you get more explosive as you get older. That's just the way that it usually works. If you're putting in the work, not for everyone, not everyone gets quicker. It's like, you get quicker and then you kind of hit that peak age in your late 20s to 30s, and then you kind of, go down. Some guys peak at 18. But I don't think Kingston's one of those guys. So it's just about getting himself in the best position possible. And I think for Kingston, a lot of that is going to be pass game wise, being more assignment correct. He's actually pretty rangy and good in coverage at times, but then there's other times you can just tell he wasn't sure what he was doing. Like when he knows what he's doing, he looked really good. And then of course he's going to have a potential niche as a third down guy, but it's just about becoming more of an every down player and saying, hey, look, that guy's just too good to be there. It won't get earned until the fall, but the summer is when that foundation is going to be laid for him. And those are aspects of his game that he can improve upon to say, hey, listen, he stepped up and he's now doing this. This guy's got to play more. So that's kind of it's the same thing for Madden Faremo to a degree. It's just he's a year further behind. It's just about can you take your game to that next level to where we can trust you to go do your job snap after snap after snap. Madden had some of the same issues this spring that Kingston had last spring. Madden's were a little bit more glaring, but it was similar. And then Kingston the summer and the fall, because a part of it for Madden is you're absorbing the playbook now. Things are going to start slowing down for you mentally.
Yeah.
And that's going to be also true for Kingston to a degree and Drake to a degree. That's part of that year 2 development. So I think that's going to be the key for him is getting that position where when fall camp starts, you're like, this guy is about to take off and be that guy. And that's what it's about for Kingston. And that's also going to be true for Jaden Osbury. He's going to try to do the same thing to where it's like he's got to start and be the guy. And at the end of the day, I don't care who starts next to Drake Bowen and who's part of the rotation, because it's going to be in a big-time elite linebacker room. I just feel like Kingston raising his game to more closer to his full potential is what gives this room as a whole its full potential. And then you can use Jaden Osbury as a bit of a swing guy which is ultimately where I would love to use him. Kind of like how Tavon Coney was in 2017, where he didn't start half the time. He still led the team in tackles, like that kind of role. I could see something like that. But that's my ultimate kind of, I hope this is how it shakes out this spring. Because if it does, or this summer, because if it does, and those guys put themselves in those kind of positions, that's how this linebacker room goes from, top 3 to 5 to where it's better than Pitt's, it's better than A&M's, it's better than Georgia's, it's better than everybody's. And that's going to be the big key.
Yeah, absolutely. The next position group we're going to talk about was actually one of our biggest risers from the spring, from, end of February to the end of April. We started talking about this position group in a much different light, and that's safeties. But this offseason, they're still kind of battling a similar discussion of what the linebackers are, of who's going to start alongside Drake Bowen. Safeties, who's starting alongside of Don Schuler. Now, one of the players that is coming back from injury this summer was Jalen Stroman, who he was around the program. He was a mid-year enrollee from the transfer portal, but got some stuff cleaned up from the injury he had against Virginia Tech. He comes back in, and he is now a full participant, I believe, in the summer workouts as well. So, for me, I look at the safeties, it's a kind of a two-parter. One, can the young safeties continue to ascend like they did in the spring? Jadon Blair, Bronte Johnson, and Luke Talich. Luke Talich, not a young player in terms of his academic eligibility, but in terms of his experience on the field playing in meaningful snaps. Can he take that next step, continue to take that next step? And then where does Jalen Stroman fall in this? Because they brought him in because of his experience from Virginia Tech. They brought him in because he was a playmaker at Virginia Tech. He was getting potential day 2 draft hype before, unfortunately, his season was cut short in 2024. So the safeties is another position that's going to start to lay the foundation of ironing itself out before July 31st when fall camp starts. So, Brian, when you look at the safety room in the summer, what are some of the things that you need to see from that group?
It's just about continued maturation. It's the summer is going to be a great period for them because in the summer, the nice thing about the summer is there's a ton of pass game reps this summer. You're doing 1-on-1s and 7-on-7s all summer long. I think the thing we saw from Kingston, not from Kingston, but from Jadon, from Bronte, you and I saw Bronte on Saturday or on Friday. He is filled out well. Like, dude, you did not understand how skinny Bronte was when he was in Irish Invasion a few years ago. Like, really skinny. He looked like you expect a college safety to look that's going to come down and smack people. But we know he can run. So for Bronte, coming downhill this spring he was good. He was really good at it. Jadon was really good at it. The question was going to be, can they kind of take their overall all-around game to another level? And that's going to be the biggest question mark for the safety room is I think this here's my kind of bold take right now for the safety room. I'm fully confident that Notre Dame is going to have a better safety room against the run in 2025 than they did in 2024. Because all the guys stepping into the mix are more physical at the point of attack than or not physical because Xavier was he would play hard. It's just, he wasn't really strong when it came to like just coming down and smack. He was a form tackler. He was just a positional, he was a position player, meaning he was getting in position and being sound. And the other side, but they weren't like, he wasn't like a thumper. He wasn't like a Don. These guys are much more physical at the point of it. They're stronger. They bring more force when they arrive at the ball, and they're rangy. The question is going to be, how much do you lose in the pass game not having Xavier? And so the summer is a great period of time for Notre Dame to be able to have those young guys and Jalen Stroman really take that step from a coverage standpoint. Because if they don't improve there, then the safety room will take a step back. If they can just be good in coverage, then with what they bring in the run game, then that's where I think the safety room can be as good as it was last year. But that is going to have to, they're going to have to this summer take big jumps in that regard, technical jumps, knowing the scheme, knowledge of the defense, things like that, playing together, communication. Those are all huge things for them to learn and play with this summer.
Well, it's going to be one thing that I'm interested to see how Jalen Stroman handles that. There's been some conversation around, I guess you could call it his lack of raw production numbers in the secondary at Virginia Tech, but that's just, they didn't ask him to cover the same way they asked Xavier Watts to cover, relative to what those defenses were. So I look at it as, okay, how does Jalen Stroman become acclimated to potentially playing somewhat of a different role than what he was asked to do at Virginia Tech? Or if you, and I'm asking your opinion on this, or do you kind of ask him to stay somewhat of that same player? I don't know how that would work out.
I think that depends on whether he's starting or not. You're talking about Jalen Stroman, right?
Yep.
I think it depends on whether he's starting or not, whether or not they view him as a full-time guy or rotational guy. Because if he's just going to be a rotational guy and play sort of the same number of snaps that Rod Hurd played last year, then you just let him be the backup to a Don Schuler and come in and be an alley filler and a downhill guy. If your expectation is that you want to be able to play him and a Don together, then he's going to have to raise his level of play. But I think that my opinion of watching Jalen Stroman on film was not so much that he can't cover, it's they just didn't ask him to do it very often.
Yeah.
And there's a difference. And I think he was fine in coverage when he was allowed to do it. Now it's about, can you learn the technique? Can you get comfortable with it to where you're not always thinking downhill, downhill, downhill? That's a concern I have for Adon as well. That's my one concern for Don Schuler this year, on top of just normal cleaning up year one to year two things. Don't go out of control as much as he did. Be a better form tackler. Know when it's time to put your helmet on the football and know when it's time to, square up and hit a guy. And so there are things he'll have to learn. But Jalen Stroman's a guy that's going to have to show that he can do that on a more full-time basis to be basically a starter or a co-starter on this defense because of how well those other guys play. Because I still think the ideal scenario for Notre Dame is those two are starting beside each other, and then Bronte and Jadon and Luke can kind of work in at different roles. But then, Luke's going to also get a chance this summer to battle and say, no, I'm not taking a second. I'm not taking it. Look, y'all screwed up by giving me a chance to get first-team reps this spring, and you're not getting this position back. Like, that's what he's going to try to prove this summer. But all of them, Jadon, Bronte, as the two young guys, and then, of course, the veterans, Jalen Stroman and Luke Talich, it's all the same thing. You've got to get more consistent playing the passing game. And that's good, because otherwise you're going to have to then ask Adon to do more of it. And Adon can do it, but is that really like the best thing for Adon to always be deep in playing cover two and single high in cover three? Now you're taking him away from the football. That could work because Adon's a good football player, but I think you want to have both of your safety positions be interchangeable in that regard. So that's
sure.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Yeah, fair enough. Sticking along the secondary, another aspect that we're going to be looking at and monitoring closely this summer is going to be the integration for some of the younger players that are coming in. Dallas Golden is on campus. Mark Zachary is on campus, and then Brandon Logan as well. Those are three younger players in the secondary that are going to start to build out some meaningful depth. Because at the top of the depth chart, Leonard Moore, Devontae Smith, Christian Gray, that is a darn good secondary, one that I would argue is the best in college football. After that, it's a lot of inexperience, a lot of young players. Carson Hobbs is young. Then behind them, you got, Ben Minnick was taking some reps at nickel. We'll see what that continues to play out to be. He's got to stay healthy as well. But then, you got Cree Thomas. He was an early enrollee true freshman, but still a true freshman. Dallas Golden, Mark Zachary, Brandon Logan are all also going to be true freshmen. So their maturation in this offseason, beginning now, it started this week, is going to be crucial to the depth in the secondary, because we've had to see over the past couple seasons, true freshmen had to come in, step up, and play in crucial moments. Christian Gray had to do it against Pitt in 2023. He also rotated in before. Did he start against Pitt, or he just rotated in and finished the game against Pitt?
About Christian Gray?
Yeah.
He rotated in. So they started Jaden Mickey and Cam Hart. And then Christian was already rotating in. And then when Cam got hurt early in that game, they pulled. Cam could have played that game, but they were up on him pretty big. So they're like, we're not taking a chance. So they told him he's not playing. Benjamin didn't start the game. And then once Cam was out full time, then Christian basically was the starter as opposed to the rotation guy.
That's right. Okay. And then last season, we obviously know Leonard Moore was rotating in and then took over as a full-time starter. So if history is telling us anything, especially recent history, a young DB will have to be ready to go at some point this season when his number is called. And that number is the number of younger players is getting increasingly larger in Notre Dame's defensive backfield, specifically around the cornerback position. So for me, for Brian, I know that we've talked a lot about the young corners that are going to be on campus. Mark Zachary and Dallas Golden and Brandon Logan are going to have to mature pretty quickly over the summer.
Look, Carson Hobbs had a really good spring. Cree Thomas had a really good spring. But even there, so you've got 3 starting corner positions right now, essentially, with Leonard and Christian, but then also you've got Devontae Smith as a nickel, and his backups are a combination of safeties and nickels. I think they'd like to have more of a pure cover guy there. And then Ben Minnick looked good there, but that's why they played Carson Hobbs there, and that's why I think Dallas Golden will get a shot to play there. But at the end of the day, if you guys want to crack the 2 deep, you're going to have to perform very well this spring. I think one of those guys will have a shot. You don't need one of them to step up and be in 2 deep, because right now you go Ben Minnick as the backup at nickel, and you could have Carson Hobbs as a backup at one corner spot, and Cree Thomas is the other corner spot, knowing that that Carson can also play in the slot. I think ideally Carson is still at the point technically where you want him to kind of master one position as opposed to cross-training. I think we saw some issues with him in the spring, as good as he was, that there's still some technical things, some assignment things where moving back and forth he'd look great on one play and then kind of be out of position the next. I still want to let him master a position to where if something happens to Christian or Leonard, he has perfected the outside corner position as much as possible, and he can go in there and shine. That's my goal. If Mike Mickens feels he's capable of doing both, then I trust Mike Mickens with that analysis. But you're going to have a better time but at the same thing, you may have to do that out of necessity.
Sure.
It may not be that he believes he's fully ready to do both this year. Maybe next year he will be, but you have to do that out of necessity. You don't really want to do that. So if you can have a third guy step up, then that's great. And Ben Minnick had a nice spring. But that's where a guy like Dallas Golden perhaps could get an opportunity to come in and really earn a spot in the 2 deep. And I think Mark Zachary is another player that is the Notre Dame coaching staff is very high on. They are not looking at these 2 freshman corners as guys that they have to step up this summer. It's more so talking to different people. They think they will step up this summer because they're just that good. And so I had a chance to bump into Dallas and his dad on Friday. You guys saw me talking to them for a little bit, and he looks ready to go. They've been up here for like several days. Mark Zachary, from what I've been told, has had a really good spring so far. He's ready to go. He's getting stronger. So those 2 kids just have to come in and just show off athletically. That's the big thing for them, is impress athletically this summer. Like 2 of those guys are really athletic. And then over time, learn from the other players in regard to kind of how to play the game. That's going to be a big part of it. And start getting comfortable with the calls and the schemes and things like that. That's going to be their focus this summer, because I do think you need one of them to be ready to be in the 2 deep, whether it's they earn their way in or whether it's that they have to play because of injury. Because that's the reality where Notre Dame is. They're an injury away from a freshman having to be in the 2 deep. It's not ideally where you want to be, but it's where they are.
Yeah, absolutely. Fair enough. Last thing, it's more big picture, but big news in the offseason. Obviously, Notre Dame has a new defensive coordinator for Chris Ash, and this summer is more time working within the Chris Ash system. And it is going to be crucial for players at all levels. Every single person that we talked about today fall under the category of getting used to having the transition of, okay, you had one defensive coordinator in 2024. A lot of these guys like Josh Burnham, Gabe Rubio, Jason Onya, they were with Al Golden his entire time in South Bend. And now they're going to have to adjust to how Coach Ash does certain things. And so it's going to be more time. The thing that plays into their favor is they return every single position coach that they had last season. They have Max Bullough to lean on. They have Al Washington to lean on. They have Mike Mickens to lean on. But that's going to be another factor in the summer as well for this Notre Dame defense.
Yeah, it will. It will. Just kind of thinking through this whole thing, Trev, and you kind of look at where this defense is going to be, and there's like when you're installing a new defense, there's blocks to it, right? Like there's sort of the on the board winter install. There's the on the field spring install. I think it was very important that Chris Ash focus more on the technique, the fundamentals, laying the foundation that they like scheme-wise, as opposed to just throwing everything at them. Because now they can carry a lot of that stuff into the summer and really perfect the technical part of the game with the foundational parts of the calls, and then you're ready to go really build on that scheme-wise in fall camp. And look, the way Al Golden did it worked too. And it's not one better than the other. There's one that I prefer, and that's the way that Chris Ash does it, especially when you have a pretty young team, which Notre Dame is still going to have a pretty young team this year. Experienced defense, because a lot of guys played, but still young. And you talk about there's a chance that your top three linebackers could be a true junior, a redshirt sophomore, and a sophomore. And your secondary is going, could be a redshirt sophomore, Christian Gray being, if you think about it, Christian Gray is the most experienced guy in the secondary right now at Notre Dame. And so that's why I say, like, these guys are young. There's a game experience, but they're young. And then you've got some veterans that are in year one of playing in it. And so being able to kind of build on what you did, and that can be a challenge when you're in year one of a system, because you don't quite know it as much as others. But because of what I was told, Chris Ash didn't come in and just reinvent the wheel and throw it all out. Now it's new terminology, new scheme, new this, new that. The things that they're having to learn new are much smaller than when they went from what they were before to now. And so I think those are things that they're going to have to really build on this summer. And that's where it can be a little bit challenging, because they could be putting in the work and it's not quite what, they would do if the coaches were doing it. That can be a little bit of an interesting challenge. But yeah, how well they do, Trevor, and really building on the Chris Ash defense is going to be key.
Absolutely. Any final thoughts on the defense this summer? All right, man. Well, listen, folks, that's going to do it for the defensive portion of the show. We are getting ready to break down Texas A&M. We are going through our opponent preview series. Texas A&M is up next on the docket. But before we get there, I know you guys said there's 261 awesome listeners in today's show. Please be sure to hit that like button. Be sure to hit that subscribe button. Hit that notification bell so you know whenever a show on Irish Breakdown kicks off and goes live. You guys will be notified right away, ideally. Whatever streaming platform you listen to us on, whether it's Spotify podcasts, Apple podcasts, we would greatly, greatly appreciate a 5-star review. I know that helps with the algorithm and getting our platform more to the forefront. So please be sure to leave us a 5-star review. We greatly appreciate it. But as always, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right, Brian, for the final segment of today's show, we are going to be breaking down Notre Dame's second opponent of the season, the Texas A&M Aggies. They are coming up to Notre Dame on September 16th. It's the first night game of the season for Notre Dame. Actually, it's the earliest night game that they've had on their schedule since Michigan in 2018. And so it's going to be a big-time game, probable top 25 matchup, if not a top 20 matchup in South Bend under the lights. This is a matchup that I'm really excited for. You and I were talking before the show, and I know a lot of the attention is going to go to the Notre Dame-Miami game. I get it. It's the first game of the season. It's in Miami. Last time they played wasn't that wasn't that high octane of a game for Notre Dame. Miami sure as heck showed up like it was a high octane game. Different story for a different show. But I think that left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. But I think sometimes it can maybe overshadow the fact that this is a pretty good Texas A&M team coming to South Bend on September 16th. So we're going to begin by breaking down the series history, looking at that up top, and then we're going to start breaking down offense and defense. I'm excited to start breaking down the Texas A&M Aggies today, man.
Yeah, it's just a big one. Like, look, your first two games are your big games. We've talked about that. Everybody knows that. And they present very different challenges. And you're facing a Texas A&M team that we spent all summer last summer. That's all anybody wanted to talk about was Texas A&M, Texas A&M, Texas A&M, because it was the first game and it was a huge game. And Notre Dame got that win, and it was a big win. And I think, I think you nailed it, Trevor. I think some of the trepidation is, well, the last time we played down there against them, boy, it was a butt whooping. And last time you played Texas A&M at their place, you got to win. So there's this confidence. Well, of course, they're going to beat Texas A&M at home. Like, that's what 2013 fans. That's what fans probably thought in 2013 when Oklahoma came back to Notre Dame. Well, they beat them in Oklahoma last year. It's probably going to beat them again this year. Nope, didn't beat them that year. So you're gonna have to be on top of your game the first 2 weeks, the first 2 games of the season. And I think Texas A&M is probably the best team that Notre Dame is going to face this year, talent wise, roster wise. I think it's the toughest game. May not be the toughest game, but it's one right now that I look at and say, I think this is the game that's really going to tell us the most about who this Notre Dame football team is. Because if you go on the road and you beat Miami, then that's great. And that's wonderful, and I'm really happy about that. But that could be kind of thrown right out the window the next week if the next game. It's a bye week in between. But if you come home that next game and all of a sudden you're down, you lose to Texas A&M at home. That takes a lot of that juice away, that excitement away, and that's something the Notre Dame's going to have to avoid. But this is a really good football team. This preview is going to look at Texas A&M. It's not going to be about the Notre Dame Texas A&M matchup per se, but I think it's important to kind of set the stage of this is the game to me that I look at and say, this is the game that's going to tell us just how good this Notre Dame team is in all phases of the game. Skill, talent, they're going to be tested on the perimeter. They're going to be tested in the trenches. I think they're going to be tested that way by both Miami and Texas A&M. So then you say, okay, well, how well do they respond to that? How well are they able to come out and say, hey, listen, we're going to answer this test in both games and show that we can be a team that can beat you in the trenches. We can play bully ball against you. We can beat you playing big boy football. We can beat you however you want to play the game. We can beat you that way. And at the end of the day, that's what Notre Dame's got to be in order to be a champion. I mean, when you go back to to what some of those Lou Holtz teams, especially the '88 team in particular, the reason they were able to beat Miami, and I've said this a lot of times, is everybody talks about Miami's speed and the fact that Notre Dame could actually run with Miami. And not a lot of teams could, because you had Ricky Waters and you had Rocket Ismail and you had Todd Light and Pat Terrell. I mean, long-time NFL players, elite athletes at the college level, and a lot of people can do that. But what people don't really remember about that Miami team is they were pretty flipping good in the trenches as well. And Notre Dame was able to beat them there also. And that's really the big key for me when I look at this Texas A&M football team and this Miami football team for Notre Dame is, if you want to beat these two teams, you not only got to beat them on the perimeter, because I think this A&M team is going to be faster than they were last year, especially on offense, but you also got to be able to beat them in the trenches, because I still think these are going to be two really good football teams in the trenches. And when you look at Texas A&M, that's who Mike Elko is. As we kind of dive into specifically about Texas A&M, that's who Mike Elko is. That's who he wants to be. He wants to be a coach that we want to have speed and we'll be able to do this and all that, but at the end of the day, we want to line up and smack you in the mouth. And that's the identity Mike Elko is trying to establish at Texas A&M.
Yeah, absolutely. It's year 2 under Mike Elko. I'm sure that the Notre Dame loss is still fresh in his mind. This game might weigh a little bit more for him because he's coming back to South Bend for the first time since 2017. But for Marcus Freeman, last thing I'll say, big picture, Marcus Freeman's 1-2 in home openers in his tenure at Notre Dame. He lost to Marshall at home in 2022 in the season home opener. Lost to Northern Illinois last year in the home opener. We've talked a lot and given him a lot of credit about you never make the same mistake twice. If they go down to Miami and get a win on the road to kick off their season, can you handle success? Can you pull the same strings that you pulled after you lost to Northern Illinois at home last season to spark that run, rip off 13 wins in a row? How will you handle success under a really, really good opponent? Now, the one thing is Marcus Freeman typically has the team ready to go in big games, whereas Marshall, Northern Illinois weren't those headline drawers. The Texas A&M game will be,
and that's going to be the key for Texas A&M. So let's dive into Texas A&M. Like, I think as we look at this football team and you think about what they're going to be, and just kind of this matchup. So let's just kind of get into this. Obviously, game's going to be on September 13th, as you mentioned, a night game for Notre Dame. Series history, quick series history. Notre Dame leads at 4 out of 2, won 2 out of the last 3, but won 4 out of 5. And the last 3 games have been regular season games, whereas I think the first 3 games were all Cotton Bowls. And then the last 3 games have been non-conference games. But you talk about, Trev, you talk about expectations for Notre Dame and Marcus Freeman showing that he can do this and do that. This is a big year where where Mike Elko's entering into year 2 with a lot of the same conversation that we were having about Marcus Freeman going into year 2, which is, how do you go out and beat, Clemson one week and take Ohio State down to the wire one week and, just obliterate Boston College and just do some of the things that Notre Dame did in 2022, where they looked, you go and play BYU on a neutral field and you just completely thoroughly outplay them. You go on the road and you just annihilate Drake May in North Carolina. And then that same team loses to Marshall, loses to Stanford, and you're just like, I don't understand how that happens. How do you beat South Carolina in a bowl game, but then just get outplayed by Stanford? But you then have those great wins. And you look at Texas A&M. I don't know that they didn't have a Stanford Marshall type of loss, but you look at you lose to Notre Dame. No shame in that, right? That's kind of like the Notre Dame Ohio State loss in year 1. Then you kind of get hot a little bit, and then you go not only lose to South Carolina, but you get annihilated by South Carolina. And then you go on the road and you lose to an Auburn team that, simply put, just was not very good last year. We can be honest about that. That Auburn team didn't even go to a bowl game with that win. Their other wins last year were over Alabama A&M, New Mexico, Kentucky, who was terrible, and Louisiana Monroe. And then they beat Texas A&M. And you look at it and say, boy, that's just, how do you have that? How do you have that kind of loss? And it's a little bit of a head scratcher if you're a Texas A&M fan. And then you just go out there and thoroughly get beat by Texas. And then you lose to a 6-6 USC team in a bowl game. And it's like, how does that team that beat Florida convincingly, that blew out Missouri, that destroyed LSU, how does that team look like they did against South Carolina, Auburn, and Texas and South Carolina? There's no shame in losing by 10 to Texas and Notre Dame. That's 2 of the Final Four teams in the country last year. There's no shame in that. Losing at home to both of them is a little bit of a oh man, come on now. But the loss to Auburn, bad loss. The loss to South Carolina, the way they lost was a bad loss, and then getting just not whooped. They didn't get whooped by USC, but getting beat by a USC team that you just shouldn't have lost to. You now go into year 2 saying, okay, you got a lot of guys coming back. Can you take that next step? And that's going to be the challenge for Mike Elko and his staff as they enter year 2 is there's a lot of coaches. There's a lot of coaching continuity. Both your coordinators are back. I believe their O-line coach is back. Can you take that jump in year 2 with a team that's going to have a lot of guys coming back, but some very important pieces are gone as well? And that's going to be the challenge for them this season.
Correct me if I'm wrong on this, but Texas A&M was in contention to play for the SEC championship, weren't they?
If they were able to Texas in the last game of the regular season, they would have played for the conference championship because they at that point in time had only 2 conference losses, same as Georgia.
That's right.
And so if they'd have beat Texas, they would have played Georgia, I believe, in the conference because they would have had the head-to-head win over Texas. So they would have played Georgia in the SEC title game. I believe is how, if I remember correctly, that's how that one would have played out. Because of their 5 losses, only 2 of them were in their conference, which kind of,
that's actually crazy.
3 of them going into that game.
Yeah,
only 2 of them were in that. So they ended up losing 3 conference games overall. But going into the Texas game, that was the deal. They were 8-3, but one of their losses was to Notre Dame. So they would have been 6-2, tied with Texas, tied with Georgia. They'd have got in.
Gotcha. Good deal. Yeah, you start talking about expectations in 2025 for this Texas A&M team, and I look at it. You got to take a jump on year 2 under Mike Elko. Defense has to get shored up. He's a defensive-minded head coach, and we're talking about a team that allowed over 40 points to South Carolina, 35 points against USC in a bowl game. And so the overtime loss to Auburn, I think, was also a 40-point game for Auburn's offense. It was either 40 – I couldn't remember if it was 34.
Like 43-41, I believe. Okay. It was the final. And they let Auburn hit some plays on them. I'm going to look up the box score on that one because it did go to overtime. And they scored so it was 31-31 at the end of regulation.
Okay.
And they gave up and A&M needed to come back to get there. A&M scored 24 points in the second half. It was a 21-0 game. A&M scored late in the second quarter to make it 21-7. Then A&M came back and tied it up. And then Auburn took a lead again, and then A&M went up 31-28. Auburn kicks a field goal with 5 seconds left, sends it to overtime. Then they touchdown in number one, and then it was field goal in overtime number two, and then A&M hit a 2-point conversion in this third overtime, and Texas A&M did not. But yeah, they had to come back they were down 21-0 in that game, and had to come back, which it shows the grit to come back. But
Sure.
fixing it's about not being down 21-0 to a team like Auburn is going to be the key in year two. But the fact that they came back the way they did, I think, is further evidence that this program is growing. It's just not there yet, or wasn't there yet in 2025. And the end result may not have been what you wanted. But in my opinion, Trevor, and I'm curious what your thoughts on this, I felt like even with I think 8-5 was a disappointing season for the talent that team had. Having said that, I can still look back and say, I think there's a lot of growth from a program standpoint where you say, yeah, they're not there yet, but they're definitely not what they were under Jimbo anymore either. And I think that's a very important takeaway for this football team, because that's a good foundation to build on. I think in some ways the culture was improved in very important ways, even though maybe the results weren't what I'm sure that they were looking for a lot of the time.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with that. Some of my takeaways from Mike Elko year one at Texas A&M were some of my takeaways of Marcus Freeman in year one at Notre Dame after the 2022 season. Texas A&M played Notre Dame hard. Yes, it was a double-digit loss, but for most of the game, it was within it was very close.
Notre Dame scored 2 touchdowns or two scores in the last few minutes of the game. It was 13-13 in the middle of the third quarter.
Yeah. It was a much closer game, kind of similar to what the Notre Dame-Ohio State game was in 2022 when they opened. Yes, the final score was 21-10, but for a good chunk of the third quarter, it was 10-7. Notre Dame had the lead.
Notre Dame led until within the last minute and a half of the third quarters when Ohio State took their first lead.
And so when I look at what Mike Elko did for Texas A&M, you had your wins, like you highlighted. How do you beat an LSU team the way that you did? How do you compete in some of these other games? But then you lose to USC in a bowl game. How do you get blown out to South Carolina? I believe at home. That game was was that game at Kyle Field?
Let me look. I thought it was on the road. Yeah, it was at South Carolina.
Okay, at South Carolina. Okay, but regardless, to get blown out
it doesn't matter where they played. That's not – they shouldn't have blown – like to your point, they should not have been beat as badly as they did. Losing on the road to South Carolina wasn't the problem. It was the way they lost.
Mm-hmm.
That was the big problem for me.
But to answer your question, yeah, I feel the same way that you do. It was 8-5 is a disappointing season for Texas A&M, just like 9-4 was a disappointing season for Notre Dame when Marcus Freeman took over. But the foundation and the groundwork that they laid in that season propelled Notre Dame to do what they did last season. Texas A&M, I think, is set up to take a jump in year two under Mike Elko. They have a lot of coaching consistency, as you pointed out. I think some of the things are going to get shored up offensively because I don't think that they're going to be going back and forth with this quarterback thing that they had last season. So I think some of that organically is going to get worked out heading into this season. And so I think that's a good place to start when we start breaking down Texas A&M's offense.
Yeah, I think when you look at this A&M team, Trev, it absolutely does start with it starts with the quarterback position, and you've got to get it solidified. And when you look at the results last season of Texas, this is a team offensively that struggled with its identity. It's like they were trying to do things with Connor Wegman that they shouldn't have been doing. Then they tried to do some things with Marcel Reed that they probably shouldn't have done. It's about finding your identity as a football team. And they want to be a balanced football team. There's no question. They don't want to be just a run heavy. Like they don't want the offense to look like when Colin Klein was the quarterback at Kansas State, where he, was your leading rusher. They don't need him to do that. You want to have a quarterback that can make plays with his legs. You want to have a quarterback that's a threat, but he's also got to be able to make throws and things like that. And I don't know that Marcel Reed is that guy, but now you get to find out because there's no quarterback battle. You're not torn between two styles of quarterback as you try. I mean, you're doing reps for Marcel Reed that maybe he doesn't fit and reps for Connor Wegman that maybe he doesn't fit. Now you've got who your quarterback is, and you're building around that guy. And if they're able to do it that way, then you hope it could kind of take off. Because, I mean, you're talking about a team, Trev, you've made this point about how Notre Dame didn't get their first touchdown pass until was the game like 4, game 5, something like that. Well, Texas A&M didn't have their first 200-plus yard game passing until Missouri on October 5th. That was game 6 for them. So similar situation for them last season. I mean, they only passed for 100 yards against Notre Dame. And some of it was great defense by Notre Dame. Some of it was Connor Wegman just make some bad throws. And then there were some games where, you look at the Texas game, same kind of thing. When they lose to Texas, they only have 146 passing yards in that game. So having a quarterback that they can now identify, you're the guy, as long as he continues to improve, I think should help this offense kind of like I think consistency and continuity is important, Trevor, from a head coaching standpoint, from an assistant coaching standpoint. But the final piece of that is from a quarterback standpoint. Just knowing who your guy is, as not even the players. I'm talking about the coaches knowing who the guy is and not having to say, well, let's build around these guys. You're building around Marcel Reed. We'll find out if he's a guy capable of taking them to the promised land, but you're going to find out if he's that guy. And it was funny listening to Texas A&M fans after the LSU game saying, well, you're lucky you didn't have to play Texas A&M with Marcel Reed, and then they went and lost 4 of their last 5 games. There's extenuating circumstance. I'm not saying it's because of Marcel Reed, but I think by that point in time that the offense had just the lack of identity established did them in. And that's kind of the thing. And it's whereas LSU wasn't prepared for that. When the rest of the teams could prepare for that, they were able to shut it down because Texas A&M wasn't good enough at doing the things they needed to do. And there were some injuries, not having Le'Veon Moss certainly mattered, but there were some issues there offensively that your lack of identity throughout the season really came to plague you late in the year when you were playing Texas and some of those, South Carolina, some of those teams that had really good athletes on defense. Auburn game wasn't because of the offense. The offense started slow, but the offense also got them back in the game. You lost to South Carolina, you lost to Notre Dame, you lost to Texas because your offense wasn't good enough. And you should be able to have more of an identity going into year 2 with your quarterback. And now your offense is also learning year 2 of an offense. And so it's not last year where everybody's learning a new offense. Now they know it. And I think that should help them quite a bit on offense.
Yeah, last season was weird. When I go back and I break down the film, there were times throughout the season where Connor Wegman would be in, and they would be calling plays like Marcel Reed was in the game. Then they would put Marcel Reed in the game and call plays like Connor Wegman was still in the game. So it was an interesting, yes, you could call it, like it was an interesting relationship of what that offensive identity was last year for Texas A&M. But this year they're going to be bolstered by an improved running game, an experienced offensive line, things that we're going to talk about here in just a second. But now having their solidified quarterback through the winter, the spring, this part of the offseason, I'm not as high as Marcel Reed as what some other people are. I'm not, staking my claim that he's going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC, but I do think this offense is going to be much improved because all of the signs are pointing in that direction. You have your solidified guy. You're going into year 2 of Colin Klein's offense, and some of the staples that you need for a consistent offense, Texas A&M does have.
Yeah.
But as long as Marcel Reed is able to take that step and find the in-between between your performances in games, like I think he won SEC Freshman of the Week twice last year.
Mm-hmm.
If you can find the in-between of that, then having some of the turnover issues and the accuracy issues that you had against South Carolina, if you can find the in-between,
right,
he'll be a decent quarterback for that offense.
Well, a lot of things that I'll say about Marcel Reed are similar to things I'll say about C.J. Carr at Notre Dame. They don't need him to carry the team this year the way they did last year. And we'll get into some other position groups to explain why, but the supporting cast around him will be better this year, in my opinion. A lot of it being because they're in year 2 of the system. Certain guys are going into year 2 as starters. The offensive line is playing together. The backfield. So you don't need Marcel Reed to put the team on his shoulders and carry him the way that they did in November. And I think that's going to be key. Now it's like, look, run the offense, get the ball where it needs to go, and then we're going to need you to make 2 or 3 big throws a game, and we're going to need you to do some things with your legs. And that's going to be the key. You needed him. It's kind of like Notre Dame. Notre Dame needed Riley Leonard last year. They needed a guy that could put the team on his shoulders and say, I got you. A&M needed that guy last year. And Marcel Reed, Riley Leonard was a 2-year starter being thrust into that role, a very talented player. Marcel Reed was a first-year guy who was coming off the bench. You can't ask him to be that guy. Well, now they don't need him to be that guy because I think what's around him will be a better supporting cast in a lot of different ways, which we'll get into here as we continue breaking down this Texas A&M team. But that's the thing is, and I think the experience last year should help him be solidified. Now behind that, let's see what they have around it. That's going to be, in my opinion, a very interesting dynamic is kind of finding out what also is there with them. And I think that's going to be a very interesting element to what this team is going to be. Is can Texas A&M take that next step offensively? Your quarterback has to be part of it. I just don't think he needs to be the necessarily the main driver of that. He just needs to be the leader of the offense, get the ball where it needs to get to, and then make 2-3 plays with your arm, and then just be a minimum chain mover with your legs. And then anything you give beyond that, it's gravy and it makes you harder to stop. Like that's the minimum for this offense to kind of take that next step.
Yeah, absolutely. The supporting cast around what Marcel Reed has makes, one, what he brings to the table all the more lethal and difficult to defend, but two, it's part of the reason why I feel confident in saying that Texas A&M might have the hardest offense for them to stop this season for different reasons. And for me, that starts with the backfield. You look at what this running back room has coming back. We've spent a lot of time this offseason talking about Le'Veon Moss. He probably would have been an 1,000-yard back if he didn't get banged up last season.
I think we talked about this. What was it last week? It was something like 1,250 yards, something like that is what he was on. If he just would have, like, I took away the game where he had 2 yards for 8 carries out of his numbers, and he had 10 touchdowns in basically 8 games. Because he had 2 carries for 8 yards, and I think it was the South Carolina game is when he got hurt. He had 2 carries for 8 yards. I took that out. You average those numbers over 8 games and put it towards 13. He's over 1,200 yards with, I think it was something like 15 touchdowns. He also caught 10 passes in 8 games as well. So, or actually be 9 games because he did catch a pass in the South Carolina game. But yeah, he has a much different year. And who knows, maybe that's enough for them to beat Auburn in that game. Maybe. And so maybe that's enough to beat USC. I don't know that. But I don't know if it made a huge difference because you still had Amari Daniels. But by the end of the year, running back, you don't have Le'Veon Moss and you don't have Reuben Owens. And that's the key is, like, if you think about Notre Dame, it's like Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price, and Aeneas Williams, let's say. Well, by the end of the year, if you don't have Love or Williams and it's just Price, yeah, Price is pretty good, but now it's all on him. And that's pretty much what they were going through last year once Le'Veon went down because Reuben Owens got hurt at the beginning of the season. Or actually, I think it was fall camp is when Reuben Owens got hurt.
Yep. Yeah, it was.
E.J. Smith's a nice player, but E.J. Smith is not on the same level as Le'Veon Moss and Reuben Owens and Amari Daniels. He's just not.
No, I agree with you there. But this backfield, now that they have Reuben Owens back, Le'Veon Moss is back healthy, and he still had a productive year last year despite missing some time. I mean, he still had 10 rushing touchdowns. He averaged 6.3 yards per carry,
over
765 rushing yards. Yeah, man. I mean, he was a very effective back. I think he was the running back that tied up the game when Notre Dame was playing. And I think he was the one that had that goal line rush for a touchdown score. But regardless, they have a 3-headed monster in that backfield that will be the core of what their offense will be made up of. Because there are questions around, what is Marcel Reed's ability and consistency as a downfield passer. We're going to talk about the receiving room in a little bit. But between the rushing ability of Marcel Reed, which is a proven factor from last season, and what this running back room is made up of, that's what makes this offense so dangerous. That is why, to Brian's point earlier, when we were talking about Marcel Reed, he doesn't have to put on the Superman cape every single week because they have 3 running backs that are more than capable of taking over some football games.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's yeah. I'm with you. Not a lot of that. It's like you look at you. This is part of what I like about A&M this year. Take away the Notre Dame A&M matchup. That's not the point. We're just previewing A&M. This is why I'm higher on A&M. I think I have A&M 11th on my preseason top 25.
Mm.
And when I saw the rankings come out, I saw people having A&M in the 20s. I'm like, what? And they're putting LSU in the top 10, but not A&M, who had the same regular season record but smacked LSU. Like I don't understand it, and I don't quite get why. Maybe because A&M didn't have as many transfer guys, because they didn't need as many transfer players this year. That's the whole point, because they have so many guys coming back. But I really like this team, and part of it is because in order to be a team that's a playoff contender, and I think A&M goes in this year, in my opinion, they should go into November as a playoff contender. If they get beaten in November by Texas and that knocks them out of the playoff, there's no shame in that in year 2 at all. That's a heck of a year. But I do think that they go into that game against Texas late in the year where they're battling for their playoff lives. Yeah. You know, maybe even a loss doesn't knock them out, but you better be competitive, because a competitive 10-2 maybe gets you in. Maybe even a competitive 9-3 gets you in, depending on how the season shakes out. But the point is, in order to get there, especially playing in the SEC and having a team like Notre Dame on the road in your non-conference, you have to have position groups that you can look at and say, we're as good as anybody in the country at these positions. And when you look at Texas A&M, there's 2 positions on offense where I think that's true, with this being one. And I think that's, you know, as long as they're healthy, that's going to be the key. Where's Le'Veon Moss at the end of the year? Or, I mean, at the beginning of the year. Where is Reuben Owens from a health standpoint? But that position group is key. And the other's offensive line, which I know we'll get to. We were still talking about the running backs, correct?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. Running back room is definitely loaded. It absolutely needs to be in the conversation with one of the most loaded rooms in the country.
Yeah. I think there's 2 at the top that are better than everybody else. Mm-hmm. That's Notre Dame and Penn State in whatever order. But you get into that next group, and A&M to me is absolutely in the conversation in that next group about where do they rank in that next batch of really good running back rooms.
100%.
And if it wasn't for the injury history, I would say, dude, you can make it like if Le'Veon Moss plays all year last year and he rushes for, let's say he doesn't average the same numbers at the end of the year. They play a really, South Carolina's a really good run defense at times. They had a real good D-line. Texas had a pretty good run defense. Let's say he doesn't run the ball great against USC for whatever reason, and he finishes with 1,100 yards and 13 touchdowns. That's it. Not a great finish for him on the pace he was on. That's still a pretty good year. And you're coming back with Amari Daniels. Reuben Owens is coming back. Now they're like, hey, Notre Dame and Penn State are pretty good, but boy, Texas A&M is right there with them. That's where I think the conversation would be. And so as long as the health is there, I think this is going to have a unit that's going to have a chance to be one of those top 5 running back rooms in college football. And if you're top 5 as a position group, you're elite. There's no question. And I think this running back room has a chance to be one of those. It's certainly the best running back room on their name schedule, with all due respect to Miami, with all due respect to Pitt and some of the, NC State, some other teams have good running backs. My view, if everybody's healthy, this is the best running back room on Notre Dame's schedule, and one of the best in college football next year, right after that Notre Dame and Penn State duo. Whoever you have 1 and 2, it doesn't matter. It's not the point of this conversation. Those are the two.
Yeah, absolutely. Couple more position groups to get to before we start talking about that offensive line. Up next is the wide receiver room. Now, this room almost got a complete makeover from what it was a season ago. I like the layout of what this room is now. I think you pointed this out. We talked about it before the show started. It fits more of what Colin Klein wants to do on offense. But you just go and look at what the makeup of the room is. Last year, you had Noah Thomas, who was 6'6". You had Ja'Day Walker. He was 6'3". You had some big-bodied guys in that lineup. And now this year, you have a bunch of little shifty guys. Not little, but you have smaller than 6'6" and 6'3" shifty guys in your lineup. They go out. They get Kevin Concepcion in their lineup from North Carolina. He's kind of that shifty type of wide receiver. You get Mario Craver. You got him in the portal, I believe, from Mississippi State.
Burner.
Yes.
Like small, but fast.
Yeah, absolutely flies. There's a reason he averaged 21.6 yards per catch last season. And it's not because he ended the season with 2 catches for 43 yards. Right. But, last season he had 17 catches, 368 yards, and 3 touchdowns at Mississippi State. Got an absolute burner in him. And then I like the move that Texas A&M did to really solidify Terry Bussey as an offensive player. He played both last season, but moving him over, he went from last year one of your smaller receivers that rotated into now he's your tallest in the he's your tallest in the starting lineup.
It's it's a pretty big change. I mean, it's kind of like what we've talked about with Don Schuler. It's the opposite of that, right?
Yeah.
Where we talk about Notre Dame safeties, where last year Don Schuler at 6 feet tall was the tallest safety Notre Dame had in the rotation. And now he's significantly shorter than anyone else in the rotation. And last year, Terry Buskey looked like this little tiny slot receiver compared to Jade, what was his name?
Jade Walker.
Jade Walker was like 6'4" and ripped up, and Noah Thomas is 6'6", and then there's this little Terry Buskey running around. And now you look at him and you're just like, okay, now he's like their biggest guy they have. But the point is Trevor, is the way it looks now is this is what works for Colin Klein.
Mm-hmm.
Go look at his offenses at Kansas State and Lockett from a couple years ago. I mean, they're small, shifty, get the guys balls in space. So it may look like, wow, this is a pretty dramatic change and a pretty big difference from what it was, and it is. It's a very different unit, and they're not only built different, but they play very different. They have very different games from what Noah Thomas and Jade Walker had. But what they have is a game that's better suited for what Colin Klein wants to do offensively. And I give him credit for trying to make it work with the guys they had last year. But you needed to go out and get guys that were more geared towards what you did. And it's not that, and what I mean by that is not, well, they want short guys. What it is they want speed and they want playmakers with the ball, whether it's a 5'11", got 5'10" Mario Craver who can stretch the field, or it's a 6'3" guy that's dynamic and fast and can stretch it. Doesn't matter. The size isn't the key. It's the style of play. And they need playmakers. They want guys that can run quick game too, and they can make plays. They want guys that they can, run on crossers and they can run mesh concepts with, and that they can get on deep over routes, and that they can throw verticals too off play action or just drop backs. That's what Colin Klein wants to do, but it's about being playmakers. He wants playmakers at receiver, and he didn't have that. He had guys that were like a lot of Miles Boykin types. They were going to do their damage up to and at the catch point. After that, their work was done. He wants guys that their best work is done after the catch, and that's what this group gives them a huge improvement in that regard. Is they're much better in regard to that than they were last year. So it's not that they're better players, worse players. It's really irrelevant. They're different players, and what they needed wasn't necessarily better. What they needed was different. For example, in Notre Dame's offense, the way they could have really used the Jade Walker and the Noah Thomas, because they were a running team that was going to throw some up, some back shoulders and slot. I mean, having those guys on the outside, move the chains, things like that, that would have really been effective in what Notre Dame was trying to do. I think Georgia could have used some of that a little bit last year at times. Like it works for some people. That's not what fits what Colin Klein does, especially now as you transition into the Marcel Reed era, who is a guy that needs to be able to get the ball out quickly at times. You need to give him those outs to where now you can play off the RPO game, the read zone game, and the screen game, and it now fits what he does a lot better, on top of obviously being more of in line with what Colin Klein likes to do.
Yes, I could not agree with that more. This is very much a yards after catch type of offense. It's get the hands and the balls of the playmakers quickly, or get the ball into the hands of the playmakers quickly, and then let them go to work after the catch. Marcel Reed, you go and you watch him from last season. Now, he's going to evolve as a player. He in 2025 won't be the same guy as what he was in 2024. But based on the makeup of what the receiving room was last year, you had to run some deep comebacks. You had to run some,
slow developing
deep
big
curls.
cuts.
Exactly. Like, that's not Marcel Reed's game. This very much fits what Klein wants to do on offense. It fits who he has at starting at quarterback. But yes, this wide receiver room, I think, is this. The way I look at this is Texas A&M's receiving room has the opportunity to take this offense from being a good group and a good unit to, okay, this is a very difficult offense to stop. It's a very similar conversation to what we had about Notre Dame in 23 and 24, honestly.
It's kind of interesting, Trevor, because look, we're previewing Texas A&M as a team. We're not previewing their matchup against Notre Dame, but I do think it's relevant to. There's some similarities between what Texas A&M is this year compared to what Notre Dame is, and why are you excited about what Notre Dame is going to be this year? Well, They've got a really good offensive line coming back, and they've got a really dynamic running back room, and they got some transfers in at wide receiver that we really think are going to change the game a little bit, to where now the quarterback doesn't have to carry it the way that last year's quarterback was expected to carry it. And the expectation is they're going to take a big jump. And there's a lot. I mean, it's different ways. And Notre Dame brought in a 6'4", 220-pound guy, and Texas A&M brought in a 5'11", 190 guy from the same league that averaged 8.5 yards against last year. You know what I mean? So it's like they're very different players. But when I look at it, it's that right there. You build an offense around your quarterback that better fits what Colin Klein's good at. It was so obvious last year, and you could see it in the Notre Dame game, and it was all year, where Mike Elko was very frustrated with Colin Klein's play calling at times, very frustrated. And I think it looked disjointed a lot, because in my opinion, and I could be wrong, this is my opinion, as someone who, obviously we studied Colin Klein a lot the year before because he interviewed for the OC job at Notre Dame. So I've spent a lot of time studying his offense. What we saw last year at Texas A&M was not very similar to what Colin Klein ran at Kansas State. And my opinion is that the struggle is due to the fact that he was doing his best to try to call plays that fit the players that he has. And I give him credit for that, because that's what good coaches are supposed to do. But I just don't know that he had the experience with a variety of offenses that you need. Like Mike Denbrock has had to call a lot of different types of offenses because he's been an OC at 3 different schools and different scenarios and all that, where Colin Klein had been an OC at one school and they ran things a very similar way to the way he ran it when he was a quarterback at that school. And so I think there just wasn't that same experience. So what do you do if you're in a situation like that? Go out and get players that fit what you want to do. And what did he do this offseason? A receiver and tight end also, because I think Amari Niblack, we can kind of just quickly talk about that position as well. He's more of a pass-catching tight end. He's 6'4", 240. He didn't do anything at Texas last year. He was banged up most of the year. He was hurt in kind of the offseason, and he wasn't healthy all year. But you go back and watch him for Alabama in 2023. He's catching over routes. He's catching backside seam routes against SEC teams. He's catching deep dig routes and making plays after the catch. Like, that's what he's looking for. That big receiver that they had last year at Noah Thomas and Ja'Day Walker is now being occupied by Amari Niblack. And so I think that's the thing for them is they're built more like what Colin Klein wants an offense to look like personnel-wise, which should make him much more comfortable as a play caller this season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like this pickup that Texas A&M got in Amari Niblack from Texas. He was also playing behind Gunnar Helm, who was one of the better tight ends in college football last season. But to your point, he was banged up. What version of Amari Niblack does Texas A&M get? Do they get the 2023 Alabama version? Do they get the 2024 Texas version? I think it will be more on the side of where he was at Alabama, barring him staying healthy. But what he was able to do at Alabama was, to your point, very, very impressive. So he fits what Colin Klein wants to do on offense for sure.
Yep.
For sure. Next group that we're going to talk about, I believe, outside of the running back room, is kind of what the crown jewel of what this offense is going to be based around. Mike Elko, you said it in the opening that he wants to be a team that is built in the trenches. And this offensive line group is very experienced. They're very big. They have a lot of chemistry together. You guys can see it is
very big it is putting it mildly.
Yeah, they're gigantic. Line. Yes, they are gigantic, and they have the numbers to boot. You know, this team last year, this offensive line has a combined 3,629 snaps coming back from just 2024. They also have a combined 59 starts. So this is a very experienced group. The running backs will be very familiar with the group that they're going to be running behind. I mean, this is a very, very good offensive line for Texas A&M.
Mm-hmm. It's experience. I mean, that's a big key. It's big. It fits what they want to do. There's some decent athletes, but they're not making their money on athleticism. I think Trey Zune is again, I don't know how Trey Zune looks as an NFL draft prospect. He's not the athlete that like a Joe Alt was, but he's a quality athlete, but he's very long, experienced, steady on the outside, got better and better as the year went on. Demetrius Crownover has kind of taken over that spot. Him and Ruben Fothery have kind of been in a battle the last couple of years. He's another big, long kid. They're not dominant at tackle spots. Armaj Reed Adams, same thing, 6'5", 340, but he doesn't dominate the way that you think a 340-pound guy did last year. He's just really good. It's not – he's not looking like Quentin Nelson or Orlando Pace. They just do their job. And they will need this unit to play like a unit that averages about 330-plus pounds this year, where they move people a little bit more. And that was where they were a little inconsistent last season, Trevor, in that regard. But again, it's for year one in the system. I think Chase Basantis is really the key for this offensive line, because you can make a case that just pure talent, he might have the most upside of anybody on the offensive line when he's right. Now, he was very inconsistent last year, but when he was on, you could see why he was a highly ranked player coming out of high school. And him stepping up and really becoming maybe the potential stud at the position could really help that. But this is a very experienced, and all 5 of those guys started games last year. They didn't all start all 13 games, but they all started a bunch. Mark Naboo comes back, who was expected to be their starting center last year, but got hurt and wasn't able to play. But this is a good-looking group. And Armaj Reed Adams was a transfer from Kansas last year, so he's going into year 2 of the system. So this to me, this is the best part of their offense right here, is this group has to take a jump this season. And like they showed flashes of it. They're a lot like Notre Dame. They showed flashes of it last year, but it wasn't consistent. If they can be more consistent, and I think they were, late in the year, they were pretty good for the most part, but you could still, even in some of those games, you could see some issues at times against some of the better teams they played. But there's a lot of potential with this group. A lot of length and a lot of size.
Yes, definitely a lot of length, a lot of size. To your point, they built this offensive line for what they want to do offensively. But yeah, a lot of starts. I mean, I think Trey Zune and Demetrius Crownover and Armaj Reed Adams were the only ones that started all 13 games. Their center started 11, and then Chase Basantis started 9 last season. So it is a very, very experienced group, and one that if I was just looking just purely based off of size, if I was Reuben Owens or Amari Daniels or Le'Veon Moss, I wouldn't really have a bad time running behind that group of guys. That's for sure. That is for sure. Any final thoughts on Texas A&M's offense?
Yeah, I mean, what I want to kind of do with some of these, Trev, is when we kind of get down to it and we break it down, I want to dive into. I want to kind of have a little bit of fun and just make like a bold prediction about those units. And I didn't bring this up to you on the preview because I wanted to kind of be, something to think about. But what's a bold prediction that you have? And a bold prediction isn't something that you're guaranteeing is going to happen, but something that you think could happen if the unit places potential. And I'll give mine. I think Texas A&M this year on offense, when you look at what they were last season and what they look like when they were on their game, I think this is an offense that, in my opinion, can go up a touchdown in points. I think this can be one of the top 3 to 4 offenses in the SEC this year if 3 things happen. 1, Marcel Reed can become a better decision maker, a more consistent decision maker. 2, I'm right about the receiver fit in this offense, and Mario Craver is what they think he's going to be. I think he's the key because he's the true burner. And I think Terry Bussey is going to be their most dangerous receiver. I think Kevin Concepcion will be their most steady receiver. But if Mario Craver can be like a 25-catch, 500-yard guy and give them that stretch the field element, because the problem is with all the quick game and size, if they can't stretch the field, then people just start coming down and saying, hey, we got to defend your screen game, your quick game, and your run game. We're going to make you throw the ball down the field on us. And so I think Mario Craver's the guy that more than anybody else has that just pure vertical speed that can make you pay for coming down and playing man defense. That's for them all season. If that happens, then, of course, if their offensive line is steady. I think those 3 things happen. Looking at their schedule, I think this team's got a shot to go out there and be one of the top 3 to 4 scoring offenses in the SEC this season. That's my bold prediction for the SEC, for the Texas A&M offense.
Yeah, I like that. My bold prediction for them is I think Texas A&M is going to lead the SEC in total like rushing output this upcoming season. I think they're going to have 3 players who rush for over 700 yards, between a combination of some 3 of Le'Veon Moss, Amari Daniels, Reuben Owens, and Marcel Reed. And they got relatively close to what that was last season. I mean, Amari Daniels rushed for 661. Le'Veon Moss, with the injury, was over 700 yards.
Yeah.
And then Marcel Reed was over 547, and he played in 11 of their 13 games, started 8 of them. And so I think with more, now that is barring the offensive line also playing at more of a consistent level and playing up to the expectation, I guess you could say, that they would have going into this year. But
to your point, Trev, just to put a number on it, A&M finished second in rushing offense last year in the SEC, just total yards, and they finished 4th in yards per carry. But at number 2, they still finished 30 yards behind Tennessee at number 1. So even though they ranked second, there was a big gap between them and number 1. So that's a big jump, because I think you're going to have to be at 215 to 225 yards rushing per game to be at top of the SEC this year, at least, which is a sizable jump against a quality schedule. It's not an easy schedule by any stretch, but it's also not what Georgia has this season either.
Agreed.
So, yeah, it's interesting.
I'm with you. That's my bold take for the offense. I like that. That's fun.
Mm-hmm.
I like that a lot. Well, all right, folks, that's going to do it for the offensive portion. We are getting ready to transition over to the defensive portion. But you guys know what to do. Before we get there, please be sure to hit the like button, the subscribe button, hit that notification bell, share this podcast with your friends and family. But as always, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right, Brian, to wrap up today's show today, we are going to start talking about Texas A&M's defense. And at times last season, this was a little bit of a kryptonite to this team. You know, we know how many points they gave up against Auburn. They gave up 35 against USC in a bowl game. They did not look good against South Carolina, which is a little bit surprising considering who their head coach is, a very defensive-minded player. And it's something that you did not see coming.
Oh, bull. Yes, I did. Yes, I did. I said it all last offseason. This is the biggest mistake that Mike Elko made, was hiring Jay Bateman as his defensive coordinator. That's why. You don't expect it from a Mike Elko defense. But the minute he hired Jay Bateman, I did. Now, I was alone in that. Well, I wasn't alone, but I was in the minority in that, because there's still a lot of people that think Jay Bateman's good, or a lot of people just thought, and maybe this is where you're coming from, Trev. Look, Mike Elko's the head coach. That's what a lot of people say about Marcus Freeman. Mike Elko's the head coach. Defense is going to be fine. The problem in year 1, however, is Mike Elko had to establish himself as the head coach.
Fair.
First and foremost. So he couldn't work with the defense as much. And that's why I think this year might be a little bit different, Trev. And I know you had read something about that also that is going to make it very interesting. But I honestly was not surprised that their defense struggled last year because of who he hired as a defensive coordinator.
Fair enough. Yeah, that's fair. Okay, misspoke. Maybe not you per se. I was. The majority was, but
I hung 600 on Jay Bateman in the game. I'm just saying, like, when I coached against him, I'm just saying, like, we went for like 630 on him. Never been he's still getting love because of what he did at Army. It's terrible at North Carolina. Like, I still haven't understood this hire, but I think they're going to fix that in year 2.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. At the tail end of spring, there was an article put out by Athlon Sports, and it was Jay Bateman addressing the media, just talking about some defensive changes that they were going to do. And there's some things that they're doing schematically. He was very vocal around Mike Elko is going to get more involved with the defense this upcoming season, more hands-on, meaning not necessarily calling plays and calling the defense on the sideline, but very involved of giving his input and installation. They are scrapping some old ideas, and they're more modernizing their defense. And with some of what we're getting ready to talk about, some of the personnel that they have coming back, I think that's a smart move, because there were some things that they did last season that were a little bit uncharacteristic of what a Mike Elko thought of defense was a little weird to see it unfold on the field. And so that's where this defense is at heading into this season. And I think this part of the ball, yes, the offense will have the opportunity to put it over the top, and with the running game and what their offensive line is made up of, they'll be a good team in the SEC. But defensively is where, if they get that aspect shored up, I don't think they're going to have as wide of a margin of error of doing what you did against LSU, but then also doing what you did against South Carolina.
It's the variance in their performance last year. Like, I don't think this version of the A&M defense has the talent to be as dominant as last year's defense was and it was on. Now, there weren't a lot of games where they played that way for an entire game, but there were stretches where they played that way. There were times when their run defense was brilliant and their pass defense wasn't, or when their pass defense was really good and their run defense wasn't. I think you'll see a little bit more consistency in that regard this year. But last year, it was about, in my opinion, underachieving talent. I think part of that was scheme. I think part of that, too, was, let's just be honest, there were some guys that I don't know were as bought into the team aspect of it that you'd want them to be, and most of those guys are gone now. And so they're going to be a little bit more, like up front, for example, a little bit more kind of try-hard guys as opposed to a bunch of potential first-round draft picks. But I think their guys are going to play with more consistency, play with better motors, and then you're pretty good on the back end, the linebacker and secondary. But I know a lot of people, I think they look at A&M taking a step back because of what they lost up front, and that's very fair. But I think they were pretty deep defensive line last year, like Notre Dame, losing, 2 All-American defensive tackles and losing R.J. Oben and that type of thing. But they had good depth. They got a couple portal guys in on the defensive line. They've got some young players who can play. But I think it's more about just they got to play with more consistency of execution. That's what killed them last year, Trev. You and I were talking about this before the show. There were times when you're just like, a JV offense could have hit that hole. Like, there was no, like, either they didn't execute it correctly or the call was just terrible. Either way, it's on the defensive coordinator. And there are just times you're just like, I don't understand why you're giving up right now. And especially as teams got more and more film on what they did, that's why you saw them. They looked pretty decent early, but then after you got a little bit of film on them, they kind of fell apart second half of the year. And when their defensive line didn't get home, they were in trouble. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, to your point, that feeds into what some of the question marks are that some people have about this team, because they lost Nick Scorton, Shamar Stewart, and Shamar Turner. Those are heavy-hitting names. But who they have coming back along the defensive line, I think, to your point about them maybe not being round 1 NFL draft talent, I think it's going to be really, really good for what this defensive line needs. Albert Regis, he was a starter last season. He comes back along the interior. Cassius Howell is somebody that I'm really paying attention to off of the edge. He was somebody last season who he had 34 total pressures, 24 hurries, 10 hits plus sacks on the quarterback. He finished the season with 4 sacks. He's somebody that he can hurt you off the edge. He has good size. He's not as twitchy of an athlete, I think, as Nick Scorton was, but he was productive. He was
definitely
very consistent.
Big.
Yeah. Yep. He's very consistent. To your point about having the motor, I think it's going to be more of a constant motor out of Howell this season. I don't know if he'll have some of the highest of highs as what Scorton or Turner or Stewart had. But
he's not as dominant of a talent as what they were. I mean, I think that's fair to say.
Yeah, absolutely. But this defensive line group, again, similar to who Mike Elko wants to be in the trenches, they have pretty decent size. They're not an overly massive group, but they have good size and they have good motors compared to times last.
Their DNs last year were like 275 and 285.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
they were big guys, but like the thing for me, like Rylan Kennedy's a good football player. I think Cassius Howell's a good football player. If you're saying like, okay, they don't have the elite first round NFL talent that they had last year, okay, that's fair. But it's more so. I think what the issue is when I look at A&M, Trevor, it's, are you evaluating them on what they lost, what they had, or what they have? And my whole thing is what they lost is sort of irrelevant to this conversation. It's about what do they have? Do they have players that can step in and be good football players? And to that degree, I think that they do. I mean, you talked about Cassius Howell was a rotation guy last year. rotation guy that had 8.5 tackles for loss, which was third on the defense. And so, Cassius Howe is not Nick Scouton. I don't think, he's not he's actually better than the kid that got drafted 17th overall, Shamar Stewart. He's a better player. He's just not the freak talent athlete that the Shamar Stewart was, but he's definitely a better, like a more productive player is I guess the way that I'm trying to do that and frame that. I think that's clear when you look at the production he had last year. When you look at what he did at Bowling Green 2 years ago, he had 10.5 tackles for loss, 9.5 sacks, 1 forced fumble. Last year, he comes to Texas A&M, and as part of a rotation, he's a guy that has 8.5 tackles for loss and 4 sacks. But he wasn't an every down player like he was at Bowling Green. So you bring in TJ Searcy from Florida, who last year had 4 tackles for loss and 2 sacks. The year before that, 3.5 tackles for loss, half a sack. In his first 2 years at Florida, 6'5", 255, good sized kid, quality athlete. That was a key member of the rotation. He's a guy that it's a good rotation player. And so when I look at this team, Trev, I just see guys that they don't have quite the same type of the elite level players they had last year, but they have good potential. And, what can Ryland Kennedy step into the lineup and produce? I think or does TJ Searcy go over there? Like this is the depth chart that Athlon Sports provided in their preseason magazine. But I could see TJ Searcy being over on the other side and kind of step Searcy. I put Searcy. It's my bad on the spelling there. But TJ Searcy starting over there. They got Deion Hayes out of the portal. If you remember him, he was a kid that had some pretty silly things to say last offseason. He was at Pitt 2 years ago, had 10.5 tackles for loss and 4 sacks, and then it was like, I'm going to Colorado because I want to win, and it didn't work out for him at Colorado. And he had 3.5 tackles for loss and 2 sacks. He comes in, he'll be much better off playing in this system than he did in Colorado's. And I think he'll be somewhere in between what he was at Pitt and what he was here. He's a good rotation player. He's not even in the 2 deep on Athlon, but he comes in. So there's a lot of good football players. Does anybody step up as a star? I don't know the answer to that, but you can have a pretty darn good defense with these 2 guys, this group of guys on the defensive end, as long as your interior is good as what I think it's going to be. I think this is a group that I think is going to be pretty good for them. I think Mike Elko wants to have interior guys that eat up space and are disciplined. And as talented as Shamar Turner was, and Trevor, he was very talented. Yeah. He was an incredibly undisciplined football player. Incredibly undisciplined. And he got drafted in the second round because he's an elite talent. But there were times when you're like, this guy's unblockable. And then there are times like, I don't think he had the clue what he was supposed to do on that play. What we see now is they got bigger guys, run stuffers, gap eaters that can allow their linebackers to fly to the football. I think that's what Mike Elko wants. And not that they're just big stiffs that can't move, but I think that's what they're looking for. They got Tyler Onyedem out of the transfer portal. He's a good football player as well. He's listed as a starter on our lads. He's listed as a backup over there. He's a guy that 2 years ago at Iowa State had 6.5 tackles for loss and 2 sacks. So, there's some talent there. There's size there up the middle to better suit what I think they're looking to do. So I don't think they're going to have an elite D-line, but I think it's going to still be a good D-line that can allow them, if they play more disciplined football, to be much improved over what they were last season. They won't be as flashy. They won't be as sexy, but I think there's enough talent here to have a pretty good defensive line, especially Trevor, when you look at those linebackers they got coming back.
Yeah, this Texas A&M linebacker room is one that I'm pretty high on. I really like Torian York. He comes back. He was ranked as Lindy's number 4 inside linebacker returning in college football this season. And then Scooby Williams, who was banged up a little bit last season, but that didn't prevent the two. They combined for 125 total tackles, 17 tackles for a loss, 2.5 sacks. They each had a pick, and I believe they each had a fumble recovery. And so this is a group where it fits to what Mike Elko wants to do on defense, to your point. Let your linebackers come downhill. Like Torian York, he's a very disciplined football player. He's not a crazy, flashy athlete. He doesn't have elite size. I mean, he's 6 foot. He's 235. But he's a very smart football player. He's an instinctive football player. he's a pretty good tackler. Scooby Williams, I would say, is the more athletic of the two. One, he's got to stay healthy. But two, he has a little bit of sometimes can come in a little out of control to him, misses some tackles. But if he can get that short up, I really like this linebacker room, man, between Torian York and Scooby.
Well, and Scooby was in year one of that system too after transferring over from Florida. So he's going to be more, part of it's like Drake Bowen at times last year had like, okay, you weren't real assignment correct. It's year one playing in that defense, right? And Scooby was in a situation where he wasn't necessarily a first-time starter. He had played a lot at Florida, but he was first-time starter in this defense.
Yeah.
Learning the defense. And so now that Torian York also has another year in the system too, he'll be better served than to be the leader schematically of what they're all doing. And it's like when you look at the difference between like JD Bertrand in 2022 compared to 2023. Year one in Al Golden system compared to year two. That's the same thing with this group. You are correct. Scooby is definitely the twitchier athlete. He's definitely the rangier guy. Torian York is a lot like JD Bertrand. Not the biggest guy. He's not an elite athlete, but he's a good enough athlete. He's a good athlete, but he's smart. He knows where to be. He's physical at the point of attack. He's just a good football player. Scooby may be a guy that if I'm an NFL scout, I might initially be more attracted to a guy like Scooby because of that athleticism. But then you look at Torian York and like, this guy is just steady as all get out, man. Like this guy just brings a lot of solidness. And they got good rotation players. It's not just those two guys, but there's some other guys at the rotation that could help out. Jordan Lockhart, they signed Noah McHale, who, I was very high on. And we didn't even talk about Marco Jones as a potential freshman defensive end that could play for them, who's a guy that I still wish Notre Dame would have gone after last year and landed.
Yeah.
But there's some freshmen on this front seven that I think could help. If you're a veteran player at linebacker or defensive end, you better step up and play well early, or you may find yourself losing reps to Marco Jones on the edge or Noah McHale linebacker. You could absolutely be true because their front seven freshman class, Trevor, wasn't a giant freshman class, but there's some dudes that can play.
Yeah.
We talked about Marco Jones. I'm a huge fan of Noah McHale. DJ Sanders was a big time, talent coming out of high school. So there's some young bucks that are going to solidify this depth chart as well for Texas A&M.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this is it's up there with Pitt for the hardest linebacking core that Notre Dame is going to have to face this upcoming season. Texas A&M is right in that discussion. They're also one of the best in the country nationally. They're in that same discussion, just like Pitt is. So this is a talented group of kids, but yeah, this is a good linebacker room.
Yeah, they're probably the biggest of the good linebacker rooms that Notre Dame faces this year. I mean, a lot of the other ones are undersized. What I like about A&M is they can hold up against the run, especially York, a little bit better. They got the linebackers to be good against the run. It's all going to come down to, can they be more stout up front and let these guys run to the football? That's going to be the key. And the biggest thing for their front seven is you guys got to be more gap correct. They were very undisciplined up in the trenches last season, very undisciplined, and that's something that hurt. It hurt them multiple times against Notre Dame. I mean, Notre Dame ripped off multiple long runs against them. One got brought back, and then the next play they do the same exact. They run a different play, but have a big gain. You have the 47-yard touchdown, and then there was no excuse for Jeremiah Love not to get touched on that last touchdown run. Now, it was a great blocking by Notre Dame, but they were aided by Texas A&M, just not being gap conscious or gap just sound as a defense. I think that's something that really held them back last year.
Yeah, absolutely. The front seven, I guess, really front six for what this defense is going to be.
Used to saying that, Trev.
Yeah, it's weird. Yeah, it's weird. Yeah. The front defensive players for this for this defense is going to be interesting. The defensive line, it reminds me, again, drawing analogies here, a little bit back to what Notre Dame's situation is. A little bit. They don't have a Bryce Young on this depth chart, but what they do have is guys that can come at you in waves, solid football players that they can keep fresh and keep rotating in a similar fashion to where we talk about Notre Dame when the opposing offensive line is on snap, 60 or 70 of the game. Maybe Cassius Howell is on snap 45 of the game. Does that play a factor? See a little bit of that with Texas A&M's defensive line. Then at linebackers, if the D-line can be assignment correct and let them fly to the football, while also still being assignment correct. This is going to be a good run defense for Texas A&M for sure. But where one of the more intriguing position groups on this defense is kind of the secondary as a whole. That one is interesting to say the least. They have Will Lee, who is I'm confident in saying the best corner that Notre Dame will face.
It's in the conversation, but yeah, I mean, for now, I think he's the most proven to be the best. I would say that's a you could make that argument. We both have him on the first team, all opponent team.
Yep. Yeah. Will Lee's last season, Will Lee had 10 passes defended, 2 interceptions last season. He has a lot of length. You guys see it right there. He's 6'3". He's 190 pounds. The cornerback position opposite of him is where I start to have some questions between Des Ricks and Julian Humphrey, the transfer that they got from Georgia. One of those two guys, ideally for Mike Elko's defense, both, but one of those two guys has to step up and start playing up to the perceived hype that they had when they had coming into college. Because both players have good raw talent, but they have to elevate their game as football players, or else there's going to be a big hole to fill in that secondary. So between Des Ricks and Julian Humphrey, one of those two has to step up and play like the player that they were expected to be coming out of high school.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, Trevor, they've got a chance to have one of the 3 or 4 best cornerback rooms in the SEC if those two guys step up. And that's going to be a big key. I mean, you mentioned both 5-star players. I think Will Lee is a very steady player. A lot of similarities between him and Cam Hart, a little bit different players, but a lot of similarities. You need those other two guys step up. And honestly, if they both step, and they got Jordan Shaw out of the transfer portal who provides depth there too. But they have to play better. I don't know that they have to play like 5 stars. I don't think they don't need Des Ricks to play like the top 10 national player he was, or Julian Humphrey to play like the top 25 national player he was from a ranking standpoint. I don't think that's really necessary. I just think they just need to be good football players. And at times last year, they were. At times last year, they were both good football players. But then, of course, as the year went on, Julian Humphrey ends up losing. I don't know if he got beat. I'll say it. He got benched at Georgia. And then instead of staying and sticking it out, he left. I'm not a big fan of that. What lessons did he learn from that? Is he more locked in? Does humility kind of motivate him a little bit? Like, I don't know. That's a good question. But that's going to be the key for him is stepping up and saying, hey, I'm going to be that guy. The thing is, they both now have a lot of experience. They both got a lot of reps last year. They got to take their game to another level. I think these two players, on top of the interior playing well, are arguably the biggest keys to this being a top SEC defense, or if it's just a good SEC defense. I expect it to at least be a good SEC defense. It was average last year. I think it'll at least be good this year. But is it good enough for them to be a team fighting for a playoff spot? That's going to be determined by the tackles, and then they need one of these two guys to step up. If they both step up, then this corner room all of a sudden becomes really good, along with Jordan Shaw, who transferred in. So, I think that's going to be a really big key for them, because Jordan Shaw's a good football player. I mean, he played at Washington last year. He had 37 tackles, 4 tackles for loss, had 6 pass breakups. So, he's no slouch of a football player either. He's a good football player as well. So, on paper, they look really good at corner. They just need those two young players to really step up and play to their potential.
Yep, absolutely. And then rounding it out with the safety position, they have Dalton Brooks coming back. He played against Notre Dame last season for the first series.
Yeah.
and he got ejected for targeting. Yeah. And then they also did Bryce Anderson. Is he a returning starter? Or did he transfer in?
Yeah, no. He's a returning starter. I think this will be his 3rd year as a starter, actually.
Okay, that's okay.
And Jared Kerr played a bunch for them last year too. And was a pretty good football player. So their safety room is as solid as you're going to get. I mean, this is probably the best safety room Notre Dame will face this year. They're the polar opposites of the corners, in that I don't think they're the high-level elite athletes. They're just good football players.
Yeah.
And I think they were hurt more than any other group from the standpoint of the lack of consistency up front put them in a lot of bad spots on the back end. And I think that hurt them. But this is as good of a safety room as Notre Dame's going to find. Because, like, look, Jared Kerr is a starting caliber player, in my opinion. He's a good football player. He's just not as good as the two guys in front of him. So I think this is a really good safety room, a very steady safety room as well. At least they have the potential. Like I said, you go watch the film. I think a lot of times when they got in trouble, it was because they were put in some bad spots, more so than them necessarily struggling as football players. That was kind of my opinion of that duo last year. And like I said, Jared Kerr's a starting caliber football player and produced like it too. I mean, it's not even like saying, like, in theory, I liked him coming out of high school, so I think he could play for them. It's also like you just look at the numbers and the production, that he had. So I think he was 2 years ago, he was a pretty key and rotation player for them at safety. So he's got a chance to be a good player as well. I like this group a lot. Yeah, it's a good safety room. I definitely agree. Definitely the opposite of where the cornerback position is. I'm trying to remember. I think Kerr was hurt last year or didn't play as much last year. So that'll be the interesting thing. But he definitely played a lot for them in 22 and 23. I'm not sure if he played as much for them last year, now that I'm thinking about it. But he's a good football player. He's a starting caliber football player.
Yeah, I'm looking at what some of his numbers are right now. I mean, in 22, he had 22 total tackles. 23, he had 20 total tackles. A couple of sacks, forced fumble.
Mm-hmm. Started a few games for them.
Yeah.
I don't know what he did last year. I'd have to kind of go back and look at the film, but I don't know, like, how many snaps he played on defense last year compared to past years. I think he was a little banged up at times. I think he missed part of the offseason as well, I believe.
Yeah, it looks like some of the only minutes that he came in and played in were like garbage time minutes. Yeah. I mean, he played against McNeese, Bowling Green, New Mexico State, and then he played a little bit in the USC game, in the bowl game. So he might have been banged up. I'll have to go back and look at that too. Yeah. I'm not.
PFF's down right now. I was trying to look it up, but I can't get it to pop up on my computer right now. So
yeah, PFF's
a lot of issues on stuff. PFF's having some issues. Irish Breakdown's been having some issues today. So our website's been having issues. So yeah, it's been a funky day, very funky day, technology wise.
Love technology.
But yeah, this secondary's got a chance. And then Tyreek Chappell's a solid nickel. They got in Bravion Rogers, who I believe is a portal guy as well. No, he was not a portal guy, actually. Hold on. Give me a second. Bravion Rogers, I got the Texas A&M roster right here. I thought he transferred in, but let me just check on that to be sure of that. But he was, no, he's been at Texas A&M the last 2 years. I thought he was a transfer for some reason, but he's their backup nickel. But Tyreek Chappell played a lot last year. Played a lot for them for a couple years, I believe. But he's a guy that could play safety for them also. He's a steady nickel. But I think this has a chance to be a really good secondary if those corners can step up opposite Will Lee. I think this has a chance to be a really steady, solid secondary this season. Very good group.
Yeah. Absolutely. A lot of it is going to be at that cornerback 2 position between Des Riggs and Julian Humphrey. And if they can get one of those guys to play up to their potential, it's a good group. Definitely a good group. Any final thoughts on the defense here, Brian, before we move on?
It's really going to come down to how much control does Mike Elko take of the defense. Like, that's going to be the key for me, because if he's just going to let Jay Bateman run the show again, then I think they're going to be some of the similar issues they've had last year. And the same issues North Carolina had, in that you're just going to have just too many what was that plays? Like, did they forget that the B gap is kind of an important gap that you need to have somebody in? You know what I mean? Like, what are they doing right now? Like, I don't understand what that coverage was even trying to accomplish. Like, you'll have stuff like that. And so, I just look at it and say, if they can just be more steady, and I think that's what Mike Elko's defenses were at Duke. That's what Mike Elko's defense was at Notre Dame. It was just you're going to line up, you're going to know what to do, and you're going to fly to the football.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not what they were last year. I also think there were some players that weren't necessarily as bought in to what Notre Dame was trying to do last season. If they can perform better, that's going to be part of it as well. There's just a lot that goes into it, but this defense has it's a strange year in that they weren't very good on defense last season. Like at times they were pretty good. I mean, even the Notre Dame game, I said this at the time, Notre Dame missed a lot of opportunities in that game.
Yeah.
I mean, there's the corner route where Will Lee falls down that if Riley Leonard sees it, it's a touchdown. I mean, there were opportunities. The dig route where Chris Mitchell's wide open for a catch and run at midfield and Riley just throws it into the ground. Like, you had an offensive line starting with 6 career starts going into that game. That O-line had no business going toe-to-toe and then whooping A&M down the stretch. And they did. Fourth quarter, Notre Dame's offensive line just took control of that game. They had no business doing that against Texas A&M. That's not a shot at Notre Dame. No offensive line with 6 career starts in game 1 should have done that to that D-line.
Sure.
It just no business happening. And then there's other weeks that D-line looked like world beaters. And that lack of consistency really did them in. That's just not a defense that should have given up 22 points a game. And you saw it early. I mean, they were good early in the year statistically. They weren't terrible. I mean, they held Notre Dame to 23, McNeese to 10, Florida to 20, BG to 20, Arkansas to 17, Mississippi State 20. But then the wheels kind of started to come off a little bit, especially after the LSU game. But it's as more people started seeing film of them, they started getting a little bit banged up. The lack of the holes in the defensive scheme started getting exposed more as people had more film, and they just fell apart down the stretch. In their last 6 games, they gave up 429 to LSU, 530 to South Carolina, 469 to Auburn, 458 to Texas, and then 400 to USC. And in 2 of those 5 games, they gave up 240 or more rushing yards.
Lordy.
And that's just, the game where they gave up 240 rushing yards, they gave up 218 passing yards to Texas. They gave up 301 passing yards to Auburn and 168 rushing yards. South Carolina rushed for 286 and passed for 244. And in their last 6 games, they gave up 5.9, 7.6, 6.5, 5.9, and 5.7 yards per play. The only exception was the game against New Mexico State, who went 3-9 and scored 21 points a game last year. They held them to 3 points and 214 yards of offense. So, I mean, you think about what their numbers were. 22 points a game, not great. Their scoring defense wasn't great. And let's go Texas A&M. They were 34th in scoring defense, not great. They were 63rd in total defense, which is not great. They were 62nd in yards per play, which is not great. Consider the fact that they played 2 FCS teams last year, or basically 2 FCS caliber teams, New Mexico State and McNeese State. And they held those teams to 279, and 214 yards. And then 3.5 yards per play, 4.7 yards per play. What do their numbers look like if you don't even include that? And, that's not a good place to be in for them, Trev. And I think that's where you look at and say that the numbers on defense weren't even as good as what you think. But the reality is there's too much talent for them to not be better. There just is. I mean, there's too much talent for them to not be a better football team than they were last year on defense. And I think they will be. It's the same, like in year 2 of Mike Elko's tenure, I think they will be. We saw a lot of issues with Notre Dame in year 1 of their defense and just mistakes and just things that you wouldn't expect from a Marcus Freeman coach defense based on what we did as the DC. Well, then in year 2, after they get a year under their belt, that defense got way better. And I don't know that we're going to see the same kind of jump for multiple reasons, schedule being one of them. And then just, I don't know that they have quite the height that, I just think Notre Dame had better talent on the D-line in 23 in certain areas, but they're a good football team and a talented football team on defense. And they just be better this year. It's just going to come down to, can you be Discipline. Can you be assignment correct? Can you tackle better? That's another thing that A&M's got to get better at. That's true for a lot of teams. But I think that this is a team that's got a lot of potential on defense to be a really good football team. If Mike Elko can exert more of his influence, if the defense can play more like a Mike Elko coach defense than a Jay Bateman coach defense. Because let's be honest, Trev, Jay Bateman's talking about Mike Elko's influence. That wasn't Jay Bateman's choice. Like, that's Mike Elko's choice. And it's a wise choice. It's absolutely a wise choice.
Yeah, absolutely. The defense holds the key to this team being a playoff contender or a team contending for a conference title, or they're going to be, 8-4 at the end of the regular season again, or they're going to be out of that discussion in November again. So defense has to step it up, for them. And I think they will. I think you were muted there on that last one. Sorry.
What's your bold prediction for the defense?
Bold prediction for the defense.
Mm-hmm.
I can't put numbers behind it, but I think they're going to be – they already might be, to be honest. I know we'll dive into it more when we get into other opponent previews. I think this is going to be the best secondary that Notre Dame faces. I think one of Des Ricks or Julian Humphrey steps up and is a good cornerback, too, next to Will Lee.
I dig that. My bold prediction for the for the A&M defense, and again, these are meant to be like everything goes right, and this is kind of what they're capable of, but it's not something a lot of people thinking about. Is my bold prediction for them is A&M finishes the year. It's similar to yours. A&M finishes the year with one of the 5 best secondaries in college football. It goes along with what you're talking about. Dalton Brooks is healthy. One or both of Ricks and Humphrey steps up and plays like to their 5-star potential, and the pass rush is more consistent than it was here. It won't be as dynamic, but it's more consistent. Mm-hmm. If that happens, this could end up being a really good secondary for Texas A&M.
I like that.
Yeah, that's their ceiling as a secondary. So I don't know if that's going to happen, but that's kind of my fun, bold prediction. But the problem for A&M is they have the potential to be that, but they also have the potential to look exactly like they did last year.
Yeah.
That's the concern. And that's what we don't know what they're going to be in year 2. So
yeah,
it's going to be fun to watch. And 100%. I like Mike Elko. I mean, I haven't hidden that fact. I think he's a good football coach. And I think that being in year 2 in that system is going to go well for them. I also like the fact that they didn't lose a lot in the portal. Like, that told me a little something. They lost guys in the NFL, but they didn't lose a lot of guys to the portal. All their linemen came back. A lot of their D linemen came back. Their linebackers both came back. None of their secondary starters jumped in the portal for big contracts. That tells me something. Terry Bussey didn't jump in the portal. All their running backs are coming back. That tells me a little something about where this team is. The level of buy-in that this football team has is that they didn't have a lot of those departures that some other teams had to deal with.
I'll have to go back and look, but the last time that I checked, I don't think Texas A&M took a player in the spring portal because I don't think they had to. Yeah. I'll have to go back and check. But
yeah, I'm not sure if they did, honestly, because like you said, I don't know that they had. There was a couple guys kind of like Notre Dame that they kicked the tires on a little bit. But to your point, I don't know that they did. I'm actually looking that up right now. I'm looking up the 2025 recruiting class for them and looking at their transfers. Does it not show dates on here for these guys? It does on high school kids, but it doesn't on them. Yeah, it doesn't say. Like, I know they got Jonah Wilson at receiver in January. I'm pretty sure they got Amari Niblack in the winter portal as well.
They did.
They got Kevin Concepcion in the winter portal for sure. I think Sam Pemba was in the winter portal. Mario Craver was in the winter portal. Humphrey was in the winter portal. So, yeah, I'm not sure. They didn't get anybody that we talked about in the winter portal. And I think the only guy that they lost in the winter portal was Micah Hudson.
He's the only guy they lost.
He was with them for 5 minutes and then let, you know what I mean? It's like, you can't lose what you didn't have. So, yeah. Yeah.
But no, this defense, this team as a whole, I think culturally is in a better spot than where they were at last year. Elko going into year 2, they didn't have to take any spring portal additions. They kept their losses to a minimal. The coaching staff stayed together. So it's going to be an interesting one. I think last thing we're doing today, right, Brian? Season prediction for Texas A&M.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So quick kind of little rattle off of what their schedule is.
Let me just go and pull that bad boy up, Trev, because you know what? I got it right here. I came prepared today, man.
Love it. We love it. So this is
real quick, date, team, if there's a current kickoff time, and then the far one is if they played last year, what the result was.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So this is what their schedule is this year. Odds are they're going to be undefeated when they host or when they travel up to Notre Dame, and then they have a bye after that. So odds are if Texas A&M starts the season ranked, they will be ranked when they come.
Bro, if they're not undefeated coming to play Notre Dame, then this is going to be a long year.
Yeah.
Long year for Texas A&M.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. So when you look at this overall schedule, what are some of the things that stick out to you here? Because when I look at this, that little stretch without a bye from October 11th to October 25th, they're really going to be looking forward to that bye week. That's for sure.
Couple things, Trev, is number one, you've got to hold serve at home.
Mm-hmm.
Your road schedule is brutal. You've got to play at Notre Dame. You got to play at Arkansas, which is a rivalry game. Actually, the Arkansas game, is that still in Dallas? I know they played it in Dallas last year, but I heard something about they were talking about maybe moving that game.
I'm not sure.
I'm gonna give me a second because I think that game might be in Dallas, but I'm gonna go look at that one real quick. But they played that in Arlington a lot of years. Let me go see here real quick. The Arkansas game. It's actually in Fayetteville this year. So that's not going to be a neutral site game. So I was correct. It is at Arkansas. You play at LSU, at Missouri, at Texas. None of those games are easy. You can lose every single one of them. You could also win a couple of them. They're capable of going into Fayetteville and beating Arkansas. They're capable of going down to Baton Rouge and beating LSU. They're capable of beating Missouri on the road, and they're capable of beating Texas, and they're capable of beating Notre Dame on the road. They're capable of winning all those games. It's going to be tough to win them all, but you can't afford to have a home slip up to a team like Auburn or a team like Florida, a team like South Carolina. And this is what I think makes their schedule challenging. I mean, you've got UTSA and Utah State to start the season. And UTSA, I'm not sure what they're going to be this year, but a couple of years ago, that UTSA team was really good. I mean, in 2022, for example, when they went 11-3, they were scoring almost 40 points a game. And then, the year after that, they went 9-4. They slipped up last year, went 7-6, but they've got a lot of guys coming back. Utah State, that's where Bronco Mendenhall is now. But those should be comfortable wins for Texas A&M. But it's kind of like Notre Dame. Notre Dame's G5 games are against Navy and Boise State. These aren't as good as those two teams, but they're no slouches. Samford at the end of the year, that should be an easy win. But Auburn's a team that should be improved this year. Mississippi State will be improved. They won't be very good, I don't think, but they'll be improved. Florida's a preseason top 25 team. Arkansas on the road will be a tough game. LSU on the road is going to be a tough game. Missouri on the road is going to be a tough game. You get South Carolina at home. They're a preseason top 15 to 20 team. And then you end the road or end the season against Texas. You can make a case that they've got to play the two most talented rosters in college football this year on the road.
Yeah.
When you look at Notre Dame and Texas. And then LSU's a talented roster. South Carolina is a talented roster. Missouri's no slouches. And Missouri's going to want a little payback for the beatdown A&M put on them last year. So this is a tough schedule. I mean, you could see a scenario where they're 8-4, Trev, and a better team than they were last year.
Yep.
But I think expectations-wise, I think you need at least a one-game improvement in the regular season than to win a bowl game. I think that's the expectation I have for A&M in year two. Is you've got to 9-3 is sort of, if you are 9-3 or better, you've taken a pretty good step this year. There's a scenario where I could say they're 8-4 and they're better than they were last year, but it won't be that much better because you're still 8-4. At the end of the day, you're still 8-4. And that's going to be the key. So What does that mean? Hold serve at home. That gives you 7 wins, right? UTSA, Utah State, Auburn, Mississippi State, Florida, South Carolina, Stanford. You got to hold serve at home. And then of the 5 road games, you just got to go 2-3 in those. So, let's say you lose to LSU, Texas, and Notre Dame, but you beat Arkansas, you beat Missouri. That's doable. That's certainly doable. And I think going 3-2 in those games is doable. It's going to be tough, but it's doable. But you lose a game at home, and that becomes a lot tougher. And that's why I think holding serve at home this year is incredibly important for Texas A&M, especially when you consider that of their first 6 games, only one of them is on the road. You start 5-1 and at least be competitive at Notre Dame. Obviously, the goal is to beat Notre Dame for them. But as long as you're at least competitive at Notre Dame, you're going to have some confidence. You get a bye week, and then you go on a nice little run until you got to play Arkansas. You're 5-1. All of a sudden, you're feeling a little bit better about where your football team is next year. So, I think holding serve at home is going to be very important, very, very important for them. And Arkansas is going to be coming off of a 4-game stretch of Ole Miss on the road, Memphis on the road, Notre Dame, and at Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
Where are they going to be at mentally at that game? So there's opportunities for Texas A&M to have a pretty good football team this year. If they're not able to improve their record, though, I think that you could say that could get them into some some issues.
Agreed. Yeah, I agree. Are we doing record predictions for Texas A&M?
Yes.
Awesome.
Would you like to?
I would love to.
Let's do it. Well, I have them at 9-3. I have them holding serve at home, and I have them going 2-3 on the road. I have them at 9-3. Could they be better than that? Yes. If they're 10-2 this year, am I going to be shocked? No. But they've got to prove something to me consistency-wise, and they got to prove to me that they can play a little bit better on the road than they did last season before I'm ready to completely jump on the bandwagon of Texas A&M. Yeah, they had a nice, they just didn't play that well away from home last year. They didn't. The Florida game was a win, but it was an ugly win. You beat Mississippi State on the road in another ugly game, an ugly win over a not very good team, and then you got smacked by South Carolina, and then you lost to Auburn. You got to play better on the road. But I mean, 2 of their 4 losses in the regular season were at home. But again, they were to college football semifinalists. You got to now play those teams on the road. You can't afford to have any hiccups at home this year. So that's going to be key. So I have them at 9-3. Is my prediction right now for Texas A&M, with capable of being 10-2. Depending on who your losses are to and who your wins are over, 9-3 could have them in a very good argument for being a playoff team if this year's a lot like last year was.
Yep, I agree. I also have them at 9-3. Definitely the potential to go 9-2. Some of the ones that I had trouble with, I am pretty high on this Florida team this year, but when they play Texas A&M in Kyle Field, they will just get done having played at LSU, at Miami, home against Texas, and then the 4th game of that is them playing at Kyle Field. Where are they going to be at? And all of that is without a bye. Those are consecutive games for Florida. And so I have Texas A&M over Florida in that one. And then I have some I have them holding serve at home like you do, and then I have them losing to Notre Dame on the road, LSU on the road, and Texas on the road. But it would not shock me if they were able to get by beating one of LSU or Texas. Texas might be a little bit more difficult because of what their roster might be, but I have similar feelings to kind of what you said at the start of last season of I wouldn't want to play Texas A&M in November.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of feel that way about this year's team, assuming they're able to stay healthy and do some of the things that we were predicting earlier today. And when I mean predicting, I don't mean like the set, like Will Lee or I'm sorry, Des Ricks or Julian Humphrey becoming like standout corners, but they're able to establish some sort of offensive identity. And if their defensive line is able to, play more assignment correct football, I could see them sneaking out a win over Texas, depending on what Texas's season looks like. Yeah. But yeah, I have them at 9-3 with 2 conference losses.
Mm-hmm. It's prove it time though. I mean, you hired a coach you like. You had a guy that's been there, that understands your school. He was a defensive coordinator there. Now's the time to prove it, because there's a lot of people in the chat like, oh, they'll be 8-4 like always. Well, there's a reason for that people are saying that. Because how many years have we been hearing A&M's going to be better this year? A&M's going to be better this year. A&M's going to be better this year, and they're not. And like, except for the COVID year was the anomaly. So this is Mike Elko's opportunity to prove I'm not Jimbo Fisher. I'm not Dennis Francione. I'm not Kevin Sumlin. I'm a guy that's going to build a steady winner here. And that's going to be the challenge for him this season. Can he prove it? We'll find out. We're going to find out. But there's enough talent on that team for them to go 9-3 against that schedule, which is a tough schedule. It's a tough schedule. And anything beyond that, I think, is an excellent season. You win 10 games in the regular season, barring just some of these teams just being not nearly as good as we thought. Like Florida's not as good as we thought. LSU stinks. Okay, then it takes a little something away. But still, even with that 10-2 against that schedule's no cakewalk by any stretch. It's funny you talked about A&M being a team you don't want to play in November. I believe that this year as well, but I also believe that about Texas.
Yeah. Yep. No, absolutely.
I think Texas is a team that will be much better at the end of the season than they are early in the season. Yeah.
Agreed.
So yeah, that's the Texas A&M preview. Yeah.
Well, good deal. Well, all right, folks. That's going to do it for us here today.
We're already over 3 hours, so we're going to not do a mailbag today because we didn't get a ton of questions, but I just definitely want to. Andrew Gilmore and Tommy both had questions. You guys could put those on the message board. Once it's up again. It's currently not up, but once it's up again, put those questions on the mailbag, and I'll be able to answer those from today's show. But yeah.
Well, good deal. Well, that'll do it for us here today. Recapping what Notre Dame needs to do over the summer on offense and defense, and breaking down Texas A&M. We're going to continue with the opponent previews as the weeks of the offseason continue to go along. Be sure to hop over to IB Nation Sports Talk. They're going to go live tonight at 5 p.m. Lots been happening in Notre Dame's offseason. Some stuff specifically with basketball as well. Landed some top recruits. I think they're going to cover some of that on tonight's show as well. But what's up?
No, I thought they covered that last night. Are they talking about it again tonight?
They're
actually interviewing Tony Simeone tonight. Sean's going to interview him. He's going to have him on. But yeah, they interviewed that last night, or they did that last night.
Good deal. Well, before you head out of here today, folks, please be sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit that notification bell, share this podcast.
Trev's got stories on the front page too, by the way, breaking down those 2 commitments. Those are big ones. I've had a chance to watch that center last night.
I'm excited.
He's not bad, man. He's bigger than 7 feet tall.
Yeah.
He's definitely taller than 7 feet. Like he's probably 7'2", 7'3". That's a big boy, man.
Moves well. Better than what you would think of a 7-foot kid.
Yeah. Had a couple like backdoor passes he was throwing. Like I was like, oh, okay. Like he's a bit raw, but there's something to work with there, man.
Comfortable coming up on the perimeter, setting high ball screens. Yeah.
I was like, okay, let's see what this kid can do. You hear that he's the adopted son of John Sanderson, and you're like, okay, is he coming because that's what they need to do to get Jonathan Sanderson? And I'm like, nope. that kid's got some tools.
Yeah.
He's got some tools. Yeah.
I'm excited to watch him, but Micah Shrewsbury's picking up where he left off from the 2025.
Check out Trevor's stories on them, guys. It's at irishbreakdown.com. He had some stuff on that. We were pretty fired up to cover that. So, yeah, good stuff.
Well, you guys know what it is. As always, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Brian and I will be back tomorrow for the buy, sell, hold. I believe Salty already has the thread up on the board. So make sure you go and post your submissions. But until tomorrow, that's Brian. I'm Trevor. We'll see you back here very soon on the Irish Breakdown podcast.